Arin wakes beneath an aurora that never fades, a curtain of green and violet silk unraveling across the broken ribs of the sky. The ruined library around him breathes like an organism too old to die, the air thick with dust, ink, and the faint metallic scent of time bleeding out. Books lie open on the floor, their pages curling inward as if trying to hide their words from what the world has become. The shelves lean like tired sentinels, and above them, the ceiling has long since surrendered, letting the cold starlight pour in like liquid memory. He blinks, his breath visible even though the air is neither warm nor cold. It simply exists, stagnant, as if waiting for him to notice it. Around him, clocks hang from the walls, from rafters, from the bones of the fallen ceiling. Some are wristwatches nailed into wood, others grand, gilded pendulums standing in fragments of marble. But all of them share one wound. They drip rust like veins, thin trails running down to floor, staining the pages below. Every tick comes with a twin echo, a faint delay, as though time itself were uncertain which direction to go. Arin stands slowly. His body answers with stiffness, but no pain, like a puppet that remembers the concept of motion. He looks at his hands and sees faint inscriptions written across the skin, words that shimmer when the aurora flares above. Remember the first silence. He does not know when they were written or by whom. The ink feels alive. The first sound that returns is not his own heartbeat, but the sound of footsteps, repeated endlessly from the next hall. He listens carefully and realizes it's the same short sequence. A man walking, tripping, whispering an apology, then silence. It repeats every 15 seconds, precisely, without variation. The realization strikes Arin like a slow dawn. Memories are looping. The people who once filled this place, scholars, seekers, wanderers, are caught replaying their final gestures forever. The library has become a reliquary of dying thoughts, an echo chamber where the end of everything refuses to conclude. He walks through the aisles, stepping over fallen globes and shattered lenses. In one corner, a woman's voice murmurs. The stars are changing position, again and again, each repetition slightly softer, as if the air itself is tired of carrying her words. Her figure is translucent now, light bending through her like smoke caught in glass. Arin reaches out instinctively, but his fingers pass through her outline, and the moment collapses. She restarts her loop unaware. The clocks tick again, double time, a heartbeat and its ghost. Arin feels the rhythm syncing with his pulse. For an instant, he senses that if he were to stop breathing, the clocks might also halt, as if he were part of their machinery. The aurora above flickers in response, a faint pulse of light, green giving way to gold. He realizes the sky is aware of him. There's a table at the center of the hall, still intact. Upon it rests a book with no title, its cover etched with symbols that move when not directly observed. He opens it carefully. The pages are blank until he breathes. Then lines appear, drawn by invisible ink responding to his exhalation. The words form slowly. You were not meant to wake here. He turns the page, heart steady, though his mind begins to fracture under the weight of déjà vu. The next line emerges. You've done this before. And in that moment, memories that aren't entirely begin to spill into consciousness. Flashes the same aurora, the same hall, the same ghosts repeating their deaths. He remembers writing the words on his own skin, desperate to anchor himself before the loop consumed him too. He remembers promising himself that if he ever woke again, he would try something different. The air trembles as the aurora hums, a low resonance that shakes the metal spines of clocks. Time drips faster now, the rust streams deepening into rivers. Each droplet seems to whisper as it falls, syllables of forgotten prayers or names of those trapped in the cycle. Arin looks up and sees hundreds of translucent figures suspended mid-motion across the hall. Readers, wanderers, children with lanterns, all moving, speaking, breathing, but each sealed in their final instant, endlessly folding back into itself. He understands now that the library is not a place but a construct, a memory engine powered by grief. The aurora is its pulse, a visual heartbeat of the universe's attempt to remember what it lost. Every looped memory is a stitch in a tapestry of denial, refusing the final stillness that should have followed the end. And Arin, somehow, is the anomaly, the single fragment that woke between the ticks. He closes the book. The ink on his hands glows brighter, shifting into new words. Find the first silence, and the echoes will end. The message feels familiar. He has read it before, written it before, perhaps even died because of it. Still, the faint spark of determination returns to him. A human thing, fragile yet stubborn. A soft breeze moves through the broken windows, scattering paper like snow. For a brief instant, he hears laughter, children's voices, real and warm, but it vanishes as quickly as it came, swallowed by the rhythm of repetition. He wonders if those voices belong to the world outside the loop, or if even hope has learned to repeat itself here. He steps toward the spiral staircase that descends into darkness, where the ticks sound slower, more deliberate. The aurora above follows him, its colors bending downward like a gaze. As he descends, each step triggers a faint memory. Faces without names, promises whisper at the edge of time, a woman saying, "If you wait before me, remind me who I was." When he reaches the bottom, he finds a pool of black glass. In its surface, reflections of countless Aran figures stand, each slightly different, each carrying a variation of the same wound, the same resolve. They look back at him, and he realizes they are all versions of himself from prior loops, still trapped in their respective timelines. One of them speaks, voice rippling across the mirrored surface. You can't break what you are part of. Aran kneels beside the reflection. Then what am I? The reflection smiles sadly. The librarian's last dream. The word strikes something deep within him, a pulse of grief and recognition, so sharp it warps the light around him. He remembers, then, the collapse of the first library, when the aurora tore open the sky and the keepers of knowledge tried to archive eternity itself. He had been one of them, a dream archivist, tasked with recording the end of thought. But he'd refused to seal the final entry. He'd chosen a dream instead of closing the book, and that dream had become this place. Now the loop begins to tremble. The clock skip beats. The aurora flickers violently. Aran realizes that by remembering, he is destabilizing the pattern. Memory, once perfect, now falters under awareness. The figures around him blur, their loops dissolving. The woman who whispered about the stars looks up for the first time, truly sees him, before fading into light. He understands. Breaking the cycle means letting go of the need to remember. The first silence, he whispers. It isn't a place. It's surrender. Aran steps into the pool. The glass ripples, swallowing the echoes, the clocks, the rust, the words on his hands. For the first time since eternity began, the double tick fades to one, and beneath the eternal aurora, the library exhales. At the center of the ruins, where the aurora's green fire met the ground in trembling ribbons, Aran found her. Vetra sat among the fallen columns like a forgotten statue, her silver hair tangled with vines, her eyes reflecting the light of the sky, but holding no recognition. Around her, memory took shape in broken fragments. The whisper of a child's laugh, a candle extinguishing, a name half spoken before vanishing into static. The air bent around her presence. Even silence seemed uncertain whether to approach. Aran knew who she was, though she did not. Once, she had been a goddess of memory, keeper of the threads that bound thought to soul, history to meaning. But something had hollowed her. Each dawn, her mind emptied like a cracked vessel. Every sunrise was her first. Every sunset, her death. The world's truth lived inside her once, but now she awoke to nothing. Again and again, the cycle polishing her essence down to transparency. When she looked at him, there was neither recognition nor fear, only quiet curiosity, as if the universe had manifested a question through her gaze. "You've come far," she said softly. "Do I know you?" "You did," Aran replied, "many times." Her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. "Then I must have forgotten something worth remembering." He stepped closer, careful not to disturb the field of broken time surrounding her. In that circle, clocks had melted into roots, and roots had grown into gears. The remnants of past civilizations lay fused with the bones of thought, a place where even forgetting left fossils. Vetra touched the air, and images shimmered faintly. Cities folded in light, oceans of glass, faces turning toward stars that no longer existed. "They come every morning," she murmured. The visions. I think they're dreams, but then they fade before I can name them. They're memories, Aaron said. Yours. She frowned, studying her hands. Then why don't they stay? Because you gave them away, he whispered. You carried the world's grief until it emptied you. Vetra's eyes dimmed, the aurora flickering in her tears. If that's true, then the world must be light now. And yet it feels so heavy. Aaron knelt before her. Because it remembers through you. You are its vault, its echo, its wound. She laughed, the sound thin and brittle. Then I am a poor goddess. I can't even remember my own name until someone speaks it. He looked at her with the sorrow of one who has lived through too many beginnings. Vetra, he said, your name is Vetra. The syllables hung in the air like a forgotten chord returning to resonance. For an instant, her expression sharpened. The light behind her eyes flared, and the ruins around them rippled, the aurora bending closer as if listening. Then the moment collapsed, and confusion returned. She sighed. It's beautiful when you say it, but it will be gone by dawn. Then let me record it, Aaron said. Let me keep it for you. She tilted her head. Record? Like a story? Like truth, he replied. If I can write the truth of the world as it once was, your truth, maybe it will hold. Maybe when you wake, you'll read and remember. Her gaze wandered toward the horizon, where the aurora touched a sea of dust. Truth is slippery, mortal. Even I couldn't hold it forever. I don't need forever, Aaron said. I just need one dawn where you remember me long enough to end this. Something stirred in her then, not hope, not faith, but the faint echo of trust buried deep beneath centuries of forgetting. She studied him as if trying to measure his soul. You've come before, haven't you? He hesitated. Yes. And each time I forget you? Yes. Then why return? Because each time you believed me for a little longer. The aurora shimmered in her eyes, and a single tear fell, not clear but silver, glinting like condensed memory. When it touched the ground, the ruins trembled and faint voices rose from the stones. Laughter, prayers, screams. A flood of lives that depended on her remembering them. Do you hear them? Aaron asked. They're waiting for you to remember. Vetra's hand shook. I can't bear their voices. It's too much. Then let me bear them for you, he said gently. Let me write them down, all of them. You don't have to carry everything. Just trust me long enough to speak. For a long while, she said nothing. The wind whispered through the columns, carrying the scent of ancient rain that had never fallen. Finally, she nodded. If I trust you, what will you do? I'll record the truth of the world before it was broken. The names, the stories, the faces. I'll give form to what's been forgotten. And when it's done, I'll give it back to you. She looked down at her reflection in a pool of stagnant light. And if I forget you before then I'll remind you, Aaron said. Every dawn if I must. Her lips trembled, not quite a smile. You sound like someone who's made this promise before. I have, he admitted, and I will again until it holds. The goddess rose slowly, her form shimmering as the aurora's color passed through her like breath. She was radiant and fragile, a being stitched from the remnants of time. Then write, she said, write while I still remember what words mean. Aaron opened his book, the same book that had once written back to him in invisible ink. The pages glowed faintly as he dipped his quill into the air itself, drawing light into language. Tell me about the first dawn, he said. Vetra closed her eyes. The ruins brightened, the aurora swirling faster. Images began to form, oceans before salt, stars before gravity, silence before thought. Her voice came soft and slow, as if she were translating from a forgotten tongue. The world began with forgetting, she said. The Creator forgot himself, and in that space, creation bloomed. Every memory since has been an attempt to remember what was lost. Aaron wrote feverishly, the words carving themselves into the pages like constellations. And what did we forget last? The mercy of ending, Vetra whispered. The courage to let things stay gone. Her voice faltered, her body flickering like a candle. Aaron felt the pattern repeating, her strength waning as dawn approached. Stay with me, he pleaded. You have to finish. I can't, she said, already fading. The light takes me. It always does. Then give me what you can. She reached for his hand, fingers passing through him like smoke. Remember this, Arn. The truth of the world is not in remembering. It's in forgiving what was forgotten. With that, the aurora flared violently, and the world split into color. When the light dimmed, Vetra was gone. Only her echo remained a shimmer in the dust, whispering the same sentence again and again. Each dawn, I begin anew. Arn felt his knees, the book glowing in his hands. The ink pulsed with life, her voice trapped in written form, alive but fading. He realized then that every loop, every return, every broken dawn was not failure, but a continuation of her prayer. She wasn't just forgetting. She was giving the world a chance to remember differently. And so he kept writing, each word a bridge between what had been lost and what might yet be recalled. Around him, the ruins began to hum with low light. The clock stilled. The aurora softened. When the first rays of the next dawn reached him, Arn whispered to the horizon, "Wake again, Vetra. I'll be here to remind you." And far above, for the briefest heartbeat, the aurora formed the shape of a woman's face, smiling, almost remembering. They travel along a river that refuses the laws of the world, one that flows not toward the sea, but backward through memory. The water glows faintly, filled with fragments of light that drift like reversed embers, each one a forgotten moment returning to its source. Arn and Vetra stand in a small vessel carved from the bones of an ancient tree, its surface etched with runes that shimmer when touched by the current. The river murmurs in a language older than speech, pulling them upstream through layers of time, unmaking what once was. The air thickens as they move. Instead of wind, there is a slow exhalation of years, sighing past them like dust from old pages. The further they go, the younger the world becomes. Fallen towers reassemble themselves from scattered stones. The moss recedes from bark. Burnt forests regrow in reverse. Flames shrinking into sparks. Sparks into whispers of warmth. Arn leans over the side of the boat, watching the reflections form and dissolve. "This isn't water," he murmurs. "It's memory liquefied." Vetra nods, her gaze distant. "All rivers are," she says, "but only this one remembers the way back." The light bends strangely here, as if uncertain which dawn to follow. Arn feels the pull of the current, not only on his body but within his thoughts. Each ripple passes through him like a gentle hand, rearranging what he remembers. Faces rise in the water, friends, strangers, a younger self. The past doesn't unfold. It undoes. Suddenly, the scenery shifts. He recognizes the hills, the crooked fence, the slope of the road that once led home. The river, in its backward course, threads through his childhood village. Houses stand whole again. Broken windows mend. Laughter returns to the air like migrating birds. Smoke curls upward from chimneys that had long gone cold. Arn's breath catches. "It's all here," he whispers, as if it never burned. Vetra watches him quietly. The aurora above their heads reflects on the water's surface, but she doesn't look at it. She looks at him. Be careful. The current grows stronger where memory deepens. But Arn is already leaning forward, unable to resist. There, the old bridge where he had played with his brother. The marketplace, bustling backward. People unbuying things, coins leaping from palms back into purses, conversations unspoken into silence. And then, beyond the hill, his home. He sees his mother in the doorway, alive again, her face soft with light that belongs neither to morning nor dream. She's moving in reverse, closing the door she had once opened, erasing her final farewell. But even undone, her gestures radiate tenderness. The sickness that had consumed her peels away like mist. Her body straightens, breathes, laughs soundlessly into the rewind of time. Arn reaches out instinctively, fingers trembling. "Mother." The word feels dangerous, like invoking a god. The river slows, sensing his hesitation. He can almost step out, almost cross the boundary between witness and participant. He could stay, he thinks. Stay, and the pain would unwrite itself completely. His village would never burn. His mother would never die. The ache that shaped him would dissolve. He looks at Vetra. You said this river leads to the beginning. It does, she says softly. But beginnings are cruel. They tempt you to forget why you left. Her eyes flicker with centuries of understanding, but Arin barely hears her. The air around him hums with nostalgia, the most seductive of all magics. It wraps around his chest like a warm chain, whispering, "You've earned rest. You've wandered enough. Return to what loved you." He takes a step toward the bank. The ground rises to meet him, the grass green, the scent of soil achingly familiar. His mother turns, her face perfectly clear now, and though she's moving backward, her eyes meet his. She seems to recognize him. Or maybe she always did. "Arin," she says, though it's not a word but an echo twisted against time, spoken in reverse yet perfectly understood. His vision blurs. The pull of the river falters. He is seconds away from crossing, from surrendering to the illusion of wholeness. That's when Vetra acts. Her hand clamps around his wrist with a force far beyond human, the contact searing through him like lightning. The boat lurches and the river roars in protest, its current twisting violently as if aware it's losing its prey. "Let me go," Arin cries. "She's right there. She's alive." "She's a memory," Vetra says, voice ringing with divine finality. "A beautiful one. But if you stay, you'll drown in it. Nostalgia is the gentlest death." Her grip tightens, and for the first time, he sees what she hides beneath her calm. The weight of countless lives she's watched relive her past until they vanished into them. The compassion in her eyes is bound to a terrible duty. Arin fights her at first. The water splashes cold against his chest as he tries to reach for the bank. His mother is still there, still smiling. The world behind her is unmaking, stars folding inward, the horizon reversing its sunrise. "Please," he whispers, voice breaking. "Just a moment." Vetra leans close. Every moment here steals one from the future. You can't heal by unliving pain. Then she pulls. The river shrieks, its backward current splitting into two directions, one dragging him toward the past, the other forward into the unknown. The strain tears at him. Memories spill from his mind in glowing ribbons. He sees his childhood unravel, each joy and wound dissolving in light. His mother's figure flickers like a reflection disturbed by wind, and then mercifully she fades. The moment collapses with a sound like a sigh. The river surges forward again, dragging their vessel out of the village, out of the illusion. Arin falls to his knees, gasping, his hands empty and burning. The water beneath him turns dark, not with corruption, but with the weight of honesty. Vetra releases him, her face pale but steady. "You almost stayed," she says. "I almost believed," he answers, voice hollow. "It felt real." "It was real," she says, "but not yours anymore." The river carries him onward, the current smoother now, though the ache lingers. Arin stares into the passing reflections, the world unbuilding around them as they move further upstream, toward the first memories of creation. He realizes how easy it is to confuse healing with retreat, remembrance with resurrection. For a long time, neither speaks. The aurora overhead shifts from green to pale blue, softer, sadder. In its light, Arin can see faint silhouettes within the current, other travelers who had once tried to reclaim what time had taken. Most never escape the temptation. Their forms drift endlessly along the banks, frozen mid-reach, faces serene in eternal yearning. Finally, Vetra says, "You think love lives in the past. It doesn't. It only begins there." He looks at her, and for the first time, he understands a hollowness in her. Not absence, but the burden of infinite remembrance. Do you ever wish you could forget, even for one dawn? Her eyes close. "Every dawn I do, and every dawn I fail." The river bends sharply, carrying them into darker water. The flow is violent now, as if time itself resents their defiance. Arin looks back one last time. His village dissolves into mist, his mother's smile into light. What remains is the ache of love stripped of illusion. He grips the edge of the vessel and breathes deeply. "Then let's keep going," he says, "before I start missing her again." Vetra nods once, faintly proud. Forward then, against nostalgia's trap. The current roars brighter now, and the world stretches thin around them, time unraveling like silk. As they move, Arn feels a strange calm settling in his chest. Lost no longer feels like a wound, but a doorway. Ahead, the river narrows into a glowing path that leads towards something vast and silent, the beginning of all things, where even memory must bow to truth. And so they travel on, two souls adrift in reverse time, one seeking to remember, the other learning to let go, the river carrying both toward the stillness where past and future finally meet. They met him on the third night of their journey, when the river began to whisper back. The current had grown strange, no longer merely reversing time, but speaking in overlapping tongues, voices folding to one another like overlapping sheets of sound. The aurora above had dimmed into a bruised violet, its ribbons fraying at the edges, as if the sky itself were unraveling under the pressure of too many forgotten dreams. Arn had been dozing, head bowed over his knees, when he first heard the voice. It wasn't Vetra's. Hers carried the calm clarity of God's. This one rasped like paper dragged across bone. "Tell me a story," it said. He lifted his head, heart stumbling in his chest. "Who's there?" The voice chuckled. "Ah, one who's already told it." From a mist that lay thick upon the river's surface, a figure emerged, half shadow, half reflection. He was tall, but his posture folded inward, as though burdened by something unseen. His eyes glowed faintly blue, like dying embers. Across his shoulders hung a tattered cloak that fluttered even without wind, the fabric covered in faint glyphs that moved of their own accord. Each symbol shimmered briefly before vanishing, replaced by another, names, beginnings, endings. Vetra recognized him first. "Sigrun," she murmured. The man inclined his head with theatrical weariness. "Ah, so one of the forgetful gods remembers me still. How generous." Arn frowned. "You know her?" "Everyone knows her," Sigrun said, stepping onto the surface of the river as though it were solid glass. The water rippled beneath his boots, but did not swallow him. "She is the mother of memory, and I am the bastard child of story. Once we were kin, in purpose if not in grace." Vetra's expression darkened, sorrow softening her tone. "You carry too many tales again." "I can't help it," he said, smiling faintly. "The curse demands an audience, and the audience demands more." Arn studied him. "What do you mean, audience?" At that, Sigrun tilted his head. The air around him seemed to stir, and suddenly Arn felt a pressure, a hum, the sense of invisible presence. It was as if hundreds of unseen listeners surrounded them, leaning closer, breathing in unison. Shadows flickered along the banks, shapes forming and dissolving at the edge of sight. Whispered phrases danced through the air, fragments of stories told and retold, names unfamiliar yet intimate. The girl who understood time, the man who drowned to meet the moon, the wolf that prayed for dawn. "There," Arn whispered. "They always are," Sigrun said quietly. "They never leave me. Every story I've ever told births another echo, and every echo clings. I tried to silence them once, but silence, it turns out, has a memory too." The whispers swelled, overlapping. Arn could almost make out words. Tell him what he is." Sigrun's eyes met his, and in that glance, Arn felt something ancient and terrible, not malice, but understanding. The man carried the weight of uncountable lives, uncountable endings. His voice trembled between exhaustion and reverence when he spoke again. "You shouldn't have come this far, boy." Arn's jaw tightened. "We're following the river to its source." "Ah, yes," Sigrun said, with a bitter grin. "The great unmaking. Every story thinks it can find its beginning, as though it could rewrite its fate. But trust me, I've told enough tales to know that every beginning is already an ending written in reverse." Vetra's voice softened. "He seeks to restore what was lost." "Then he'll fail beautifully," Sigrun murmured, "as all heroes do." He crouched beside the boat, tracing a circle in the water with one finger. The river's glow shifted, showing reflections that weren't their own. Arn glimpsed fragments, moments he hadn't lived yet, faces that might never be. Himself, older, kneeling before a shattered sun. Himself, younger, holding a book that bled ink. Himself, dissolving into light beside the goddess. He recoiled. "What is that?" "Possibility," Sigrun said. "Memory dreaming of itself. The audience loves that kind of thing. Foreshadowing, they call it." "The audience?" Arn repeated. Sigrun tapped his temple. "The invisible ones. They whisper new endings into my ear. Some say they're the ghosts of listeners who never stopped imagining. Others say they're the unborn, longing for stories to shape their first breaths. I stopped asking long ago. Now I simply tell." Arn stared at him. "You're cursed to remember every story?" "Every version of every story," Sigrun corrected gently. "Even ones never told. I remember what might have been, what almost was, what should never be. I remember you, too." Arn blinked. "Me?" Sigrun smiled faintly, and for an instant his eyes were not blue but mirror-like, reflecting Arn's face. "You've lived 1,000 times, Arn. In some versions you save her. In others you destroy her. In one, you drown yourself to stop remembering. The audience loved that one." Vetra frowned, the aurora flickering behind her like a heartbeat. "Enough." "Not enough," Sigrun replied softly. "He deserves to know." The whispers grew louder. "Tell him he's already someone's memory." Arn's chest constricted. "What are they saying?" Sigrun straightened, the air thickening around him. When he spoke, his voice carried the resonance of 1,000 narrators, each layered atop the other. "You are already someone's memory, Arn. You were remembered before you were born. Every step you take, every word you speak. They've been told before, lived before. You exist because someone needed your story to be told again." The words struck like thunder rolling through bone. Arn stumbled back, clutching at the side of the boat. "That's not possible." "Everything is possible when memory runs a world," Sigrun said. "You think you're seeking the truth? Perhaps you're simply fulfilling it." Vetra's gaze softened with pity. "He doesn't understand yet." "No one does, until they hear the end," Sigrun said. The invisible audience laughed softly, a ripple of breath across the river. The sound was neither cruel nor kind, only hungry. Arn looked to Vetra. "Is it true? Am I just a memory?" Her expression faltered. "All beings are memories, Arn, but some remember themselves and some don't." He shook his head, anger trembling in his voice. "No, I bleed. I think. I choose." Sigrun regarded him sadly. "So did every character I've ever told." The aurora flared, painting the river in streaks of gold and green. For a moment, all three stood silent. The mortal, the goddess, and the cursed storyteller, as the current beneath them shifted direction, uncertain which way time should flow. Finally, Sigrun broke the silence. "I'll come with you," he said. "The audience demands it. They like trilogies." Vetra studied him warily. "Your presence will draw echoes." "It already has," Sigrun replied, nodding toward the banks. Shadows began to follow the boat, silhouettes of people who were not there, whispering, murmuring, imitating their movements a heartbeat late. The air thickened with déjà vu. "Why help us?" Arn asked. Sigrun smiled, not kindly, but knowingly. "Because I need to hear how this one ends. Maybe if I stay long enough, the audience will stop whispering. Maybe they'll finally applaud and let me go." He stepped into the boat, the river trembling under his weight. The invisible audience sighed in delight, as though the next act had just begun. Arn avoided his gaze, watching the backward current carry them onward. The words "you're already someone's memory" echoed in his mind, heavy and inescapable. Behind them, the river began to shimmer with faces. Countless Arns, countless Vetras, countless worlds repeating their stories in slightly different ways. He realized then that perhaps Sigrun was right. The universe itself was a storyteller haunted by its own retellings, unable to let go of the characters it loved too much to release. And somewhere in that unseen audience, a voice whispered softly, not cruelly, but with longing, "Remember him well, the boy who refused to stay forgotten." The river carried them onward, and the story continued, aware now that it was being watched. They reached the fortress at the edge of the world when the aurora turned white. It rose from the frozen plain like a cathedral grown out of breath and regret, a labyrinth of glass and ice that caught the sky and multiplied it endlessly. The air here did not move. It simply shimmered, as if afraid of making sound. Even the river had ended, curling into stillness at the base of the citadel, becoming a mirror so perfect it reflected not light, but memory itself. Aaron felt the change first. The moment his boots touched the frost, a pressure filled the air, like entering the lungs of something ancient that was quietly dying. The ice beneath their feet was clear as crystal, but beneath its surface, shadows shifted, outlines of figures, faces, and faint echoes of gestures that might once have been human. Each of them whispered, but the words were muffled, drowned beneath layers of frozen time. "This place," Aaron murmured. "It's alive." Vetra nodded slowly. "Alive and watching." Sigrun stepped ahead of them, his breath visible though the cold didn't touch him. "The Fortress of Reflections," he said softly, as though reciting an old line. "The final archive of the god's shame. Every sin that was ever denied found its echo here." The air trembled as if acknowledging his words. The walls of the fortress groaned, the ice glowing faintly from within. Aaron turned to Vetra, seeing unease flicker across her usually calm face. "You've been here before." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I was born here." Sigrin's invisible audience stirred. Aaron could almost hear their anticipation, the rustle of unseen pages turning. They entered through a corridor that stretched into infinity. The walls were made of pure reflection, showing not their bodies but their inner selves, flickering images that changed with every step. Aaron saw versions of himself that frightened him, one holding the ring of the goddess he'd never met, one weeping beneath a black sun, one smiling as if he had learned how to forgive the end. But Vetra's reflections were worse. They did not move with her. They watched, dozens of her faces turned toward her as she passed, serene, furious, sorrowful, hollow. Some wept, others laughed soundlessly. Each one bore a faint difference, as if every forgotten moment of guilt had carved its own version of her. "Do you see them?" she asked, voice trembling. "Yes," Aaron said. They're me," she finished. The corridor ended at a massive chamber carved from translucent ice, shaped like the interior of a heart. At its center stood a mirror, immense, suspended in the air by chains of light. The surface rippled softly, as though made of liquid silver, reflecting not the present but the accumulation of centuries. Vetra approached slowly. "I sealed it long ago," she murmured, "when I first began to forget." Sigrun folded his arms, eyes glowing faintly. "And every sin you cast off gathered inside, until it learned to breathe without you." Before she could reply, the mirror stirred. The surface quivered, then bulged outward, and from it a figure stepped forth. It was Vetra, but not the hollow goddess Aaron knew. This reflection shimmered with cruel grace, her eyes burning with every emotion the real Vetra had suppressed across millennia. Her hair flowed like molten glass, her smile sharp enough to cut light. "Ah!" The reflection said, voice smooth as melting snow. "The amnesiac returns." Vetra froze. "You shouldn't exist." The reflection tilted her head. "On the contrary, I exist because you refuse to. You cast me here to keep your divinity clean. Every lie, every omission, every soul you let drown in your silence, I kept them safe for you." Aaron stepped forward. "Who are you?" The reflection looked at him, and for a moment her expression softened, not with warmth but with recognition. "I am the part of her that remembers everything, the part that never forgave herself." The air cracked like thunder. The ice around them began to pulse with a rhythm that might have been a heartbeat. Sigrun muttered something under his breath, a line only half audible, and the storyteller beheld the goddess split in twain, one of memory, one of denial. The two Vetras circled each other. The real one, trembling, uncertain, looked like a ghost beside her radiant twin. "You came to remember," said the reflection, "but memory is not gentle. It burns." "I didn't come for forgiveness," Vetra replied. "Only truth." "Truth is forgiveness," the reflection hissed, "and you have fled from both." The first blow came without warning, a flash of light, so sharp it shattered the air. The reflection struck, and the chamber filled with storm. Ice exploded from the walls, shards slicing through illusions. Vetra raised her hands, summoning the glow of the aurora itself, deflecting the assault with trembling power. Arin stumbled backward, shielding his eyes. Each time their light clashed, he saw glimpses of what they were fighting over, memories that flashed like broken film reels. A city swallowed by fog, a man on his knees begging for her help, a child whose dream had been erased to spare a god's pride. "Stop!" Arin shouted. "You're killing what's left of the world." But neither goddess heard him. Their struggle was older than creation. Each strike rewound a century. Each wound released another echo. The fortress groaned, mirrors cracking along the walls. Every reflection of Vetra, the watchers, the mourners, began to scream. Finally, the reflections seized her by the throat, their faces inches apart. "You called yourself Mother of Memory," she whispered, "but I am the Mother of Mistakes." Vetra's eyes filled with tears of light. "Then let us end together." With a cry that shook the frozen sky, she drove her hand into Mirror Self's chest. The reflection laughed, a sound too human, too broken, and the mirror behind them shattered. The explosion was silent. The shards didn't fall. They floated, spinning outward in slow motion, each one carrying a trapped voice. The storm that followed was not wind, but remembrance. Words filled the air, spiraling, overlapping. Names, pleas, accusations. "Vetra, why did you forget me? Mother of mistakes. You let us fade. Remember us." A blizzard of voices tore through the chamber, echoing across eternity. The very ice seemed to weep as the fortress collapsed inward, its walls dissolving into shimmering vapor. Arin ran toward Vetra, who had fallen to her knees in the center of the storm. Her skin glowed with fractures of light, the broken reflections crawling over her like living scars. "Vetra!" he cried, grabbing her shoulders. "Stay with me." Her voice was barely audible over the storm. "They remember, all of them, everything I tried to bury." Sigrun stood at a distance, his cloak whipping in the unseen wind. "The mirror was not your enemy," he said. "It was your witness." Vetra's hands trembled. "I can hear them all, every forgotten soul calling me Mother Mistakes." Arin held her tighter. "They're not accusing you. They're reminding you you're still their mother. You gave them life, even if you failed them." Her tears fell, crystallizing before they hit the ground. Each one became a new shard of mirror, reflecting her face differently, as a goddess, a woman, a child, a storm. Finally, she looked up at him. "What am I now, Arin?" He met her gaze, heart aching with awe and fear. "You're both, the one who forgets and the one who remembers." Vetra closed her eyes. The storm began to subside. The shards of the mirror slowed, then drifted upward, merging with the aurora. The voices faded, replaced by a soft hum, like the world exhaling after centuries of holding its breath. When the last echo vanished, only three remained in the ruins: the mortal, the cursed storyteller, and the goddess reborn from her own reflection. The air was colder, but lighter. Sigrun broke the silence. "They'll sing of this for ages," he said softly, "if ages still exist." Vetra rose unsteadily, light flickering beneath her skin. "No one will sing," she said, "not until the end remembers the beginning." Arin looked up. The aurora had changed again, no longer green or white, but translucent like the memory of color. It curved above them like a vast wound healing. In the wind, faint whispers lingered, not of blame now, but of reverence. Mother of mistakes, they called, softer this time, almost tender. And though the fortress lay in ruins, a quiet beauty lingered, the kind that only comes when something broken finally stops pretending to be whole. The banquet waited for them in the hollow heart of the world, a cathedral carved from petrified starlight, vast and silent. Frost hung from the ceiling like chandeliers of bone. At its center stretched a table that seemed to have no end, lined with golden chalices, jewel plates, and figures frozen in the act of celebration. Dozens of gods sat there, unmoving, their laughter, their songs, their toasts, all locked inside the moment of their last joy. Wine hovered midair where it had been spilled, a crimson arc made solid by the stillness of eternity. Between them, Candles burned without heat or smoke, their flames suspended like fragments of sun that had forgotten how to set. Arin stepped carefully between the seated divinities, his breath fogging in the cold. Their faces were perfect and terrible, carved from the last instant before extinction. Some smiled, some wept, others stared blankly into the nothing that had claimed them. He could feel the echo of power still radiating from their forms, faint but undeniable, like the warmth that lingers in ashes long after the fire has died. Vetra paused near the head of the table. Her expression tightened with grief that seemed to belong to the stone itself. "The Feast of Ascension," she whispered. This was the day the gods tried to celebrate eternity. Sigrin's cloak stirred, its invisible audience murmuring with fascination. "A toast to forever," he said softly. "That turned into forever itself." "Oh, they'll like this chapter." Arin turned to him. "What happened here?" "The gods made one final bargain," Vetra said, her voice low. "They wished to seal their immortality by consuming the memory of all who came before them. But memory cannot be devoured. It only migrates." The feast froze when the truth realized it was being eaten. Arin stared at the endless table. The food glowed faintly. Fruits of gold, meats that pulsed with light, bread that exhaled warmth till millennia had passed. "And they've been here since?" "Since the beginning ended," Sigrun murmured. Vetra ran her fingers along the rim of a goblet. Her hand trembled. Each cup contains a fragment of what they stole. Names, songs, forgotten heavens. "I sealed this place when I realized the price." "The price?" Arin asked. She looked at him, eyes hollow. "The loss of truth. The more the gods remembered themselves, the more they forgot the world that gave them meaning." Sigrun smiled faintly. A divine irony. Self-worship as annihilation. The audience will applaud that. Vetra ignored him. "Be careful not to touch anything. Arin, these memories bite." But curiosity was stronger than fear. Arin moved toward the nearest cup, a simple vessel of silver among the gold. It shimmered, as though aware of being watched. His reflection appeared in its surface, distorted and older, eyes filled with something ancient and tired. He felt drawn to it, as if it were waiting for him. Vetra sensed it. "Arin, don't." "I have to know," he said softly. "You said they tried to erase history. What if what's missing is what we're looking for?" Sigrun tilted his head, intrigued. "Ah, the mortal thirst for forbidden wine. Classic." Ignoring them both, Arin lifted the cup. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue, like moonlight trapped in water. It gave off no scent, yet he felt its memory pressing against his mind, yearning to be remembered again. He hesitated only a moment before he drank. The effect was immediate. The world inhaled. The frozen gods shivered once, barely perceptibly, as if the universe itself had blinked. The taste on his tongue was indescribable, sweet and cold, like drinking starlight that had learned to mourn. Then the whispers began. They did not come from the hall, but from within him. 1,000 voices surged through his skull, each speaking a single name, ancient, melodic, impossible. Names that had once shaped mountains, ruled tides, sung suns into being. He felt each syllable carve a symbol of light across his consciousness. He understood them for a heartbeat, and then they burned away, taking something with them. His knees buckled. Vetra caught him before he hit the floor. "What did you do?" she cried. He tried to speak, but the words slipped away. Something inside him had gone missing, a fragment of himself unmoored. He looked around wildly, trying to recall what it was, but the thought vanished like a dream forgotten at dawn. Sigrun crouched beside him, fascinated. "What did you hear?" "Names," Arin gasped. "Names that shouldn't exist." And each one took something. Vetra's face turned pale as frost. Every divine name carries weight. To remember them is to host them. To host them is to surrender a part of yourself. She pulled the cup from his hand. But the damage was done. The liquid inside had turned black, the glow extinguished. Arin pressed a trembling hand to his head. I can't remember my brother's face." Vetra froze. "Arin." He looked at her helplessly. "I know I had one. I remember the sound of laughter and someone running beside me. But the image, it's gone. The goddess exhaled sharply. The river gave you glimpses of the past. Now the cup takes them away. Sigrun stood, his cloak rippling with whispers. How poetic! A man drinking his own erasure. Tell me, mortal, does it hurt? Arin's eyes burned. Yes. Good, said Sigrun softly. Then at least you know you're real for now. Around them, faint motion stirred among the seated gods. Their fingers twitched, their heads turned fractionally toward Arin. Their eyes, cold, empty stars, began to glow faintly, reflecting him. They're waking, Vetra said. No, Sigrun murmured. They're remembering him. The air grew heavy. The frozen wine began to thaw, droplets hanging in midair, vibrating with suppressed life. From every corner of the hall came a low hum, the resonance of divine names yearning to be spoken again. Arin's thoughts began to scatter. Fragments of memories slipped from his grasp like wet glass. His mother's voice blurred. His home's outline melted. Even his own name began to echo strangely in his mind. Arin, Aaron, Arin, each variation fainter than the last. Vetra knelt before him, gripping his shoulders. Look at me. Anchor yourself. I'm trying, he whispered, but I don't know who's trying. Sigrun's invisible audience murmured with glee. A fine unraveling, he said softly. Drink again, mortal. Perhaps the next sip will teach you what it means to be remembered by gods. Vetra turned on him, eyes blazing. Enough. This isn't a tale for your amusement. Sigrun's smile faltered. Every tale is, eventually. The goddess rose, spreading her arms. The air shimmered, freezing the motion of the awakening gods. I sealed this place once. I can seal it again. But Arin shook his head weakly. No, if I stop now, I'll lose the names. We need them. They're the truth of what came before. You'll destroy yourself. He looked up at her, his expression strangely calm. Then remember me. That's all I ask. Before she could stop him, he seized another cup, this one gold, rimmed with fire. The liquid inside pulsed like a heartbeat. He drank. This time, the voices didn't whisper. They sang. A choir of forgotten gods roared through his mind, their names weaving into music too vast for human thought. He saw visions, constellations rearranging themselves into faces, oceans evaporating into pure sound, temples collapsing into letters of light. Each revelation filled him and then erased something else. His first love's name, the smell of rain, the memory of his own handwriting. Vetra shouted his name, but he no longer recognized it. The chalices around the table began to tremble, spilling their contents upward, defying gravity. Rivers of divine light swirled above, forming a vortex of lost language. The gods at the table opened their mouths in silent cry, and the sound of creation unspoke itself. Arin collapsed, the cup falling from his grasp. His eyes glowed faintly, reflecting infinite stars. Vetra cradled him. Stay with me, please. He blinked slowly, searching her face. Who are you? Her voice broke. Someone who still remembers. Sigrun stood back, the whispers around him subdued. Even his audience had fallen silent, reverent. He's touched the root of memory, he said. He's become a vessel. The gods won't let that go easily. The air quivered. The frozen feast resumed for a single heartbeat, goblets clinking, laughter echoing, divine music surging. And then it stopped again, as if deciding whether to live or die. When silence returned, Arin's body trembled with faint light. Vetra looked down at him and whispered, You've stolen what they tried to keep. He managed a weak smile. Then maybe they'll remember me now. The last of the divine wine evaporated, rising as mist toward the ceiling. In it, faint voices lingered, calling him by names he no longer knew. And as they left the hall, the gods remained frozen mid-toast, mid-eternity, their eyes following him with quiet acknowledgement, as though recognizing in this frail mortal the final cost of what it means to remember everything. They came upon the city at dawn, though here dawn was a lie. The horizon bled in circles, the sky never deciding between night and morning. From the ridge above the valley, Arin saw it all unfold like a ritual choreographed by memory. Towers rising from ash, flames reversing themselves into lamps, walls stitching their own wounds. The air shimmered with smoke that never reached the clouds, curling back upon itself like a serpent biting its own tail. It was beautiful and terrible. The city rebuilt itself exactly as it had been before its ruin. Every stone, every street, every cry of astonishment replayed in perfect symmetry. Then, at the moment of completion, it ignited. Fire blossomed across rooftops like blooming flowers of agony. The screams that followed were neither new nor old. They were the same as yesterday, and the day before that, echoes caught in the turning wheel of time. They're reliving it, Arin whispered. Every dawn. Vetra's eyes glowed faintly, the aurora above responding to her presence. The city of Ember restored, she murmured. It was once the heart of civilization, the first to burn and the last to forget. Now it worships its own undoing. Sigrun, walking a few paces behind, smiled without joy. A fitting audience for the end of stories. They adore repetition. It makes them feel eternal. They descended the slope in silence. The air thickened with heat, but it was not natural fire. It smelled of memory and ritual, of grief rehearsed until it became devotion. The cobblestones beneath their feet pulsed faintly, beating in rhythm with the crackle of flames. When they reached the city gates, the guards were ash. Yet even they seemed alive. Their outlines flickered, bodies were forming from soot, faces shifting between horror and serenity. One turned toward them, his voice distorted as if spoken through both throat and smoke. "Welcome back," he said. "You've come for the burning, haven't you?" Arin exchanged a glance with Vetra. "We came to stop it." The guard laughed, a hollow, echoing sound. "Stop it? Oh no. The burning is a blessing. We burn, we rebuild, and we burn again. Thus we remain unforgotten." Vetra's expression darkened. "You mistake endurance for a purpose." But the guard only smiled, his face already crumbling into ember dust. Purpose fades. Fire remembers. The city's gates swung open on their own, and the three entered. Inside, the streets were crowded with people, living, dying, returning in endless rhythm. Some carried buckets of water to quench fires that would reignite moments later. Others knelt before the flames, whispering prayers into the smoke. Above them, a great bell tolled, not in warning but in celebration. Every chime marked the precise moment the city reached the midpoint between birth and destruction. Sigrun's invisible audience murmured in delight. "They've turned tragedy into liturgy," he said. "Magnificent." "Twisted," Arin replied, watching a child laughing as her wooden toy burned and then remade itself in her hands. "They think this is salvation. To them, it is," Vetra said softly. "They have forgotten what comes after." They made their way to the city square, where a massive pyre blazed but gave off no heat. Around it stood hundreds of citizens dressed in robes of alternating black and gold, the colors of night and flame. Their faces shone with joy as they chanted in unison, voices overlapping like waves. "We die to live. We live to die. The fire keeps us whole." At the center of the pyre, a statue of glass and iron depicted a goddess with her hands raised, Vetra herself. But her eyes had been hollowed out, replaced by burning coals. Arin felt a shiver crawl down his spine. "They're worshipping you." Vetra's voice trembled. "No, they're worshipping what I abandoned, the memory of my failure." Before he could answer, the crowd saw them. A ripple passed through the people, like a shared heartbeat. Their chanting faltered, then resumed with greater fervor. "The Mother returns. The cycle blesses us again." The pyre's flames leapt higher, forming patterns in the air. Spirals, loops, the endless circle. Vetra stepped forward, her presence quieting the crowd. "Children of Ember," she said, her voice both sorrowful and commanding. "Do you not tire of dying?" The people bowed as one. "Death is a song, my lady. To end it would be blasphemy." Arin stepped beside her. "You've mistaken eternity for captivity," he said. "You think this loop preserves you, but it only erases what makes you alive, the ability to move forward." A man stepped from the crowd, a priest by his ornate robes of scorched silk. His skin shimmered like burnt glass, his eyes glowing with reverent madness. "Forward," he said. "There is no forward. The fire is the past and the future both. The moment of burning is perfect, endless. Why would we want anything after perfection? Vetra looked at him sadly. Because perfection is sterile. Because without the word after, there can be no forgiveness. The priest raised his arms, smiling as the pyre flared. Forgiveness is for those who remember sin. We have burned ours clean. We are the fire. We are... His words broke off into a scream as his body turned to ash, not from destruction, but from completion. The ash blew away, and moments later, the same man reformed from smoke at the edge of the square, bowing again as though nothing had happened. "They can't die," Aron murmured. "They're trapped." Sigrin's voice was barely audible, his audience murmuring excitedly. Every story that refuses to end becomes this. An echo that believes itself immortal. Aron clenched his fists. Then how do we end it? Vetra's gaze fixed on the statue of herself. By giving them something the cycle never taught, a word the fire has never spoken. She stepped into the pyre. The crowd gasped, but the flames did not harm her. They bent toward her like loyal pets, recognizing their maker. She raised her hand, and the burning city paused. Every spark froze midair, every scream suspended in the balance between sound and silence. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying across the stillness. "You have lived your ending for so long that you've forgotten what comes next. You burn to remember yourselves, but memory without hope is just repetition." Her eyes glowed with soft white fire. "There's a word beyond the fire, a word after." The people stared, uncertain, their lips trembling as if trying to form sounds their tongues no longer remembered. Aron stepped forward, joining her within the frozen flames. He took her hand. "Say it with us," he said. "Say after." A murmur spread through the crowd. At first it was hesitant, confused. After? Then stronger, as if the word itself carried weight. Each repetition broke something invisible. Sparks resumed falling. The sky cracked open. The fire dimmed to gold. The child with the wooden toy whispered the word. And for the first time in endless dawns, her laughter did not reset. The toy burned once and stayed ash. The crowd began to cry, not from pain, but from the shock of consequence. The city trembled. Buildings began to crumble, not from fire, but from release. The smoke lifted, revealing a sky finally choosing morning. Vetra's voice softened. "You are free now. The burning is over." But the people panicked. Some clung to the flames, as if the lovers. "No, without the fire we are nothing." Vetra knelt beside a weeping woman, whose hands were turning from ember to flesh. "You were never nothing," she whispered. "You were always becoming." The woman looked at her in awe. "Becoming what?" Aron answered quietly. "After." The word spread again, now carried not by fear but by realization. "After," they said, after. The pyre went out. Smoke rose skyward like a final prayer. When it cleared, the statue of Vetra was gone. In its place stood a tree of crystal glass, its branches glowing faintly with the light of dawn. From its roots, water began to flow, clear, new, real. Sigrun watched in silence, his audience whispering uncertainly. "They've never seen a story end this way," he murmured. "Not with rebirth, but continuation." Aron looked at him. "Maybe they'll learn to tell it differently next time." Vetra turned to the horizon. The city behind her was already fading, its people walking toward the river that had once burned, their shapes dissolving into light. "What happens to them now?" Aron asked. "They go where time still moves," she said, "where the word after lives." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The aurora above shimmered softly, no longer circling, but flowing forward, like the first page of a book finally turning. Sigrun smiled faintly, though there was sadness in it. "The audience won't like it," he said. "They prefer endings they recognize." "Then let them unlearn," Vetra replied. "Every story must burn before it can grow." As they walked away, Aron glanced back one last time. The city of eternal dawn was gone, replaced by a vast meadow of glass and ash, where the wind whispered a single word again and again, gentle, uncertain, but alive. After. The cathedral rose from the horizon like a wound that had learned architecture. Its spires were built not from stone, but from bone, pale arches and columns of vertebrae, ribs interlocking into vaults that reached toward a ceiling woven of skulls. The place hummed faintly, as if every skeleton still remembered the song of the body it once served. In the half-light of the aurora filtering to the hollow eyes above, the structure glowed with the color of forgotten moonlight. Neither white nor silver, but something between silence and surrender. Aaron stood before the entrance and felt the hum in his chest, resonating with his own heartbeat. The air smelled of dust and salt, of parchment and prayer. "Whose bones are these?" he whispered. Vetra's expression was unreadable. "Those who remembered too much," she said. "The cathedral was built to preserve the unbearable, all that even I refused to keep." Sigrun trailed behind them, his invisible audience whispering with fascination. "Ah, the hall of the unburied mind," he said with theatrical reverence. "Every god needs a graveyard for truths, and a caretaker who knows how to rearrange them." The massive doors creaked open on their own, not with hinges, but with sighs. Inside, rows of skeletal pews lined a nave that stretched into infinity. Between them hung banners of human skin, inscribed with the language of time itself. Words that shifted when looked at, forming and unforming like ripples in glass. At the far end of the hall, on a dais of polished femurs, sat the archivist. He was blind, yet his hollow eyes glowed with pale light. His hands were delicate and restless, fingers moving as if perpetually writing upon an invisible page. His robes were stitched from tendons, flowing like silk, and his voice, when it came, was a whisper woven from thousands of others. "Vetra," he said, without turning, "you've come to bargain with what you buried." The goddess inclined her head, regal even in remorse. "I seek the parts of myself I lost." The archivist's lips curved faintly. "Lost or discarded?" She did not answer. Aaron stepped forward. "Who are you?" "I am the custodian of continuity," the archivist replied. "I keep what must not vanish, and ensure what should be forgotten stays that way." He turned his hollow gaze toward Aaron, and though no eyes looked at him, Aaron felt completely seen. "And you, mortal, you carry the residue of what she lost." Aaron stiffened. "What do you mean?" The archivist gestured with one skeletal hand, and the air filled with drifting fragments of light, vision suspended like dust motes. Aaron holding Vetra's hand by the river, his defiance before the gods, his mercy in the city that burned. Her compassion, her pain, her capacity to love. "You've been storing her humanity in yourself like a vessel." Vetra's eyes widened. "That's not possible." The archivist's smile was a soft creak of bone. "It is inevitable. Gods discard what mortals absorb. Memory seeks containers, and hearts are the only ones strong enough to endure its ache." Sigrun's cloak rustled with the voices of his unseen audience. "Oh, they love this twist," he murmured. "Divinity reclaimed through human flaw. Delicious symmetry." The archivist ignored him. "I can restore your past, Vetra. Every sin, every sorrow, every truth you abandoned when you became hollow. But balance demands a sacrifice. Something of equal depth must be exchanged." Aaron frowned. "What kind of exchange?" The archivist turned his blind face toward him. "Your past, mortal. Your memories will fill the void she left. She will remember what she was, and you will forget who you are." The words echoed through the cathedral like the toll of a bell that marked no hour. Aaron felt Vetra's hand grip his. Her skin was cold, trembling faintly. "No," he said immediately. "That's not a choice. You're asking me to die in everything but name. You would live," the archivist said gently, "but without the burden of self, free of all the grief you carry." Aaron shook his head. "Grief is what makes life real. If I give that up, I'm no one." Vetra stepped forward. "Then I will give mine instead." Aaron turned to her, startled. "Vetra, no. You don't understand what he's asking." She met his gaze, her expression calm but fragile, as if carved from glass about to break. "I do. He's asking for what I owe, for what I took from others to remain divine." The archivist extended his hands. Then the exchange is made. Aaron tried to speak, but the air grew heavy, thick with bone dust and the scent of old rain. The archivist rose from his throne, and the cathedral came alive, the skeletons in the walls shifting, murmuring prayers in forgotten tongues. The very bones of the place vibrated with anticipation. Vetra stepped into the light at the center of the hall. The glow of her divinity pulsed outward, illuminating the carvings on the banners. Images of her past, her judgment upon mortals, her mercy withheld, her silence as worlds pleaded for her remembrance. "Show me," she whispered. The archivist placed a skeletal hand upon her chest. The contact made no sound, yet Aaron felt it as a vibration in his own heart. Light surged through Vetra's body, splitting her silhouette into hundreds of overlapping selves, each one a different century, a different mistake. She gasped as a flood of memories struck. The goddess cried out, her voice echoing with the weight of millennia. Her eyes filled with visions no mortal could withstand. Cities drowning, prayers unanswered, lives erased by divine neglect. Her knees buckled, and Aaron rushed forward, but invisible force held him back. The archivist turned to him. "She takes from you as well. She must feel what you carried." Aaron felt a sudden emptiness bloom in his chest, as if something warm had been drawn out, not painfully, but sorrowfully. He saw flashes of his own life flicker before him. His mother's smile, his brother's laughter, the smell of bread at dusk, the sound of rain against a tin roof. One by one, they drifted from him into the air, drawn toward Vetra. "No!" he shouted, reaching out. "Not like this." Vetra's voice came to the storm of light, strained but clear. "Let me have it. I can bear it now." The light burst outward. For a moment, everything in the cathedral froze. Even Sigrin's whispers fell silent. The aurora outside dimmed, as though bowing to the transformation occurring within. When the brilliance faded, Vetra lay collapsed on the floor. Aaron rushed to her side. She was breathing, shallow, human, alive. Beneath her hand, her chest moved with rhythm, a faint heartbeat echoing in the stillness. Her eyes opened, and for the first time since Aaron had met her, they were not distant stars but wells of warmth and confusion. She reached up and touched his face with trembling fingers. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice fragile. "I can feel everything." Tears welled in her eyes, not light, but water, actual tears. The archivist smiled faintly, his job complete. Her divinity has been tempered. She remembers pain. She remembers love. She remembers you. Aaron blinked, dizzy. "What about me?" The archivist's gaze turned inward, as if consulting something written in darkness. "You have lost fragments, but not all." She took only what she needed to awaken. Sigrin's audience murmured approval, soft as wind through dry reeds. Ah, how they adore a shared wound. Two hearts limping toward eternity. Vetra sat up, clutching her chest as if startled by its rhythm. "It's loud," she murmured. "Every beat is a promise and a punishment." Aaron smiled weakly. "Welcome to humanity." She looked at him then, truly looked, not as a god regarding her creation, but as someone seeing another soul. "It hurts," she whispered. He nodded. "It always does. That's how you know it's real." The archivist's form began to fade, bones turning to dust that shimmered upward like slow snowfall. "My work is done," he said. "Take what you have reclaimed and go. But remember, every restoration is also an exchange. What is human in her now will never be divine again." Vetra bowed her head. Perhaps that is mercy. When they stepped out of the cathedral, dawn was breaking, a real dawn, not the looping kind of the burned city. The air felt different, almost soft. Aaron inhaled deeply, realizing that the ache in his chest was both loss and relief. Beside him, Vetra walked barefoot across the frost, her expression full of wonder. She paused, touching her sternum, as though confirming the heartbeat was still there. "I never knew how loud the world is," she said quietly. "It never stopped speaking. I was simply too far above to hear." Aaron smiled. "You can hear it now." She turned toward him, her eyes reflecting the aurora that curved across the sky. "Because part of you lives inside me," she said. "I can feel your memories, laughter, sorrow, love. They are small and vast at once. I understand now why you refuse to give them up." "Do you regret it?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. For the first time in eons, I am more than memory. I am meaning." Sigrun lingered at the threshold, watching them with something like melancholy. His invisible audience whispered restlessly, awaiting his narration. "Go on," he muttered to them. "You've seen it too. A god who chose to remember pain, and a mortal who taught her why it matters. That's worth keeping." He turned and followed them out into the light, his cloak stirring with 1,000 murmured endings. Behind them, the cathedral began to collapse inward, bones folding into dust, returning to the silence from which it had been built. Its final sound was not a scream, but a sigh, the sigh of stories finally allowed to rest. And above that ruin, the heartbeat of a goddess echoed for the first time in eternity, fragile, human, unstoppable. They crossed the tundra beneath a sky that no longer bothered to choose a color. The horizon was a bruised line between worlds, half dawn, half ash. The ground glittered faintly with shards of frozen time, crunching underfoot like fractured mirrors. The air itself seemed to breathe. The wind exhaled in steady, rhythmic pulses, as though something immense lay buried beneath the ice, sleeping uneasily. Arin wrapped his cloak tighter. Even the silence here had weight. It pressed against his chest and whispered the sound of footsteps that weren't his own. Vetra walked ahead, her new heartbeat audible even in the stillness. It startled her sometimes, that fragile percussion reminding her she could now die. She kept one hand pressed lightly against her chest, as if steadying a foreign rhythm. Sigrun followed behind, his cloak dragging thin trails through the frost. His invisible audience murmured constantly now, hundreds of half-voices overlapping in tones of curiosity, fear, and fascination. "They're restless," he said quietly. "They feel something coming. The beasts wake when stories end, and ours have been running too long." "The beasts?" Arin asked. "Born from unfinished tomorrows," Sigrun replied. "Every possibility that was dreamt but never lived, every choice aborted by hesitation, they coagulate out here, in the spaces between outcomes. Hungry things, made of what should have been." Vetra's gaze narrowed toward the endless white. "They hunt those who still carry futures." Arin frowned. "Then they'll hunt us." "Especially you," she said. He didn't ask how she knew. The answer was already in the air, that strange magnetic pull, that sensation of being watched by absence. The tundra stretched on infinitely, yet something moved between the folds of light and shadow, always just beyond the corner of the eye. Whenever Arin turned, he saw nothing, only the faint tremor of air, the echo of something vast having just passed through the world. "They move only when unseen," Sigrun murmured. "That's the rule. Look too long and they turn to mist. Look away and they become teeth." Arin tried to steady his breathing. The shadows around their group seemed to lengthen, drawn toward him specifically, like ink sliding toward a quill. Hours passed, or what counted as hours in a place where time had forgotten its own tempo. The landscape began to shift subtly, ridges forming where there had been plains, distant silhouettes flickering into being and vanishing again. Arin thought he saw shapes, beasts with too many limbs, their bodies built from fragments of tomorrow, gears, feathers, frozen sunlight. One carried a human face for a heartbeat, then none at all. At last they made camp within the skeleton of a long-dead leviathan. Its ribs rose like cathedral arches, offering shelter from the ceaseless wind. Vetra knelt to light a small fire, more symbol than warmth. Arin sat across from her, exhausted. "What do they want from us?" he asked. "They want to finish what was left unfinished," Vetra said softly. "To devour the future so they can exist in it." Sigrun smiled faintly, his blind eyes glinting. "And mortals, my dear, are walking banquets of unfinished things." The fire flickered, throwing their shadows long against the ice. Arin's fell strangely, elongated, jagged, shifting even when he sat still. He frowned and moved his hand. The shadow did not follow. Vetra noticed the stillness. "What is it?" "My shadow," he said slowly. "It's wrong." He stood and turned toward the wall of ice behind him. The flickering silhouette stared back, late in its movements, like a reflection trapped in a slower world. And then it smiled. Vetra rose immediately. "Don't look away," she warned. Not for an instant. But the shadow moved first. It peeled itself from the ground like liquid darkness, stepping into the world with impossible grace. It had his height, his posture, even his face, but not his eyes. Where it should have been, there was only luminous emptiness, the color of frozen lightning. Arin felt his pulse spike. What are you? The double tilted its head. I am what you never became. Its voice was his own, steady, calm, without hesitation. Sigrun took a cautious step back, muttering to his invisible chorus. Oh, how they love mirrors turn murderers. Arin clenched his fists. You're one of the beasts. The double nodded slowly. Born from your tomorrow that never arrived. The part of you that never learned fear, never failed, never doubted. You left me behind every time you hesitated. Vetra stepped between them. These creatures feed on identity. Don't speak to it. But Arin couldn't stop. If you're what I might have been, then why hunt me? Because you're incomplete, the double said. And everything unfinished hungers to consume what remains. The air crackled. Frost crept outward from its feet, encasing the bones of the Leviathan. The fire dimmed until it was only an ember. Arin could see his breath forming shapes, not mist, but letters, words he couldn't read. He drew his blade. If you want what's left of me, come take it. The double smiled wider, a perfect replica of courage. Finally, it said, the version of us that chooses. It moved like silence breaking, fast, clean, beautiful. Arin barely raised his sword in time. The first clash rang through the cathedral of ribs like thunder. Sparks flew, freezing midair before shattering into snow. The shadow fought without hesitation. Every strike perfect, efficient. Arin, by contrast, stumbled, dodged, adapted. His movements carried the rhythm of fear, imperfect, human, alive. Each time the shadow struck, he felt the chill of inevitability. Each time he deflected, he remembered why he had survived everything else. Because he doubted, because he hesitated, and hesitation is what keeps mortals alive. Still, the creature was relentless. Its blows carved furrows into the ice, shattering ribs of ancient bone. You think fear makes you strong, it said. It only slowed you. I am what you were meant to be. Arin gritted his teeth, panting. No, you're what I would have become if I'd stopped feeling. The shadow lunged again, faster than thought. Arin dropped his sword, sidestepping at the last instant. He caught the creature's arm, feeling its cold solidity, then drove his dagger, hidden in his sleeve, into the thing's chest. Light erupted. The shadow convulsed, its body splitting into tendrils of black fire. Its voice became a whisper. I am the courage you abandoned. Arin pushed the blade deeper. Then I'll learn again with fear intact. The shadow shattered. Its body dissolved into shards of unmade futures, scattering into the wind like fragments of prophecy. When silence returned, Arin felt his knees. His own shadow lay beneath him again, trembling, obedient, ordinary. Vetra approached, kneeling beside him. You killed a version of yourself, she said. He nodded, breath ragged. One that never felt afraid. Sigrun watched with quiet fascination. You realize what that means, don't you? Fear is the last tether of the living. Without it, you'd be one of us, a creature of memory and story, never changing, never real. Arin looked up. Then maybe fear is sacred. Vetra's gaze softened. She placed a hand on his shoulder, feeling the heat still radiating from his trembling body. Fear is the pulse of choice, she said. It means you still have something to lose. He looked toward the horizon. The tundra was changing, the faint silhouettes of other beasts fading back into the mist, retreating now that one of their kind had fallen. The sky began to lighten, the aurora thinning into pale daylight. Sigrun's cloak stirred as the audience within whispered their disappointment. Ah, they prefer heroes without hesitation, he muttered. They don't understand that the brave are simply those who've made peace with trembling. Vetra helped Arin to his feet. You fought the part of yourself that thought perfection was survival. Few ever manage that. He managed a faint smile. Perfection dies quickly. They walked on, leaving behind the skeleton of the Leviathan, now half buried by drifting snow. The wind howled through its ribs, echoing the ghostly words of the fallen shadow. I am the courage you abandoned. But to Arin, it no longer sounded like accusation. It sounded like blessing. As they moved toward the edge of the tundra, he felt something new settle in his chest. Not pride, not relief, but a quiet humility, the kind that comes after facing oneself and finding, at last, something worth fearing again. The beast did not return. The world around them grew softer, the snow reflecting faint traces of dawn. And as they disappeared into the horizon, Arin's shadow followed him faithfully, smaller than before, but perfectly in step, a reminder that even darkness, when owned, can learn to walk beside the light. They found it half buried in the snow, a book bound in skin that wasn't skin, its cover faintly breathing with the rhythm of a sleeping thing. Around it, the air shimmered like heat on ice. Words hovered above the surface, forming and erasing themselves before either of them could read. Arin bent to pick it up, but Vetra caught his wrist. "Don't," she said. "It's awake." The book pulsed once, a sigh, a heartbeat, a whisper. Then it spoke. Arin lifted the tome despite her warning. His fingers froze an inch above the surface. The sentence had been spoken not by him, not by Sigrun or Vetra, but by the book itself, calm, precise, too familiar. He hesitates. He looks at the goddess. She fears what she already knows. Sigrun exhaled a low laugh. "Well," he said, "that's new. The story's telling itself before we move." Prophecy with performance anxiety. The book continued, as if ignoring them. The storyteller mocks the omen, but his laughter is hollow. He knows what follows. He always does. Sigrun's grin faltered. "Oh," he muttered, "it's personal." Vetra stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Were you?" The tome's pages fluttered though there was no wind. Each page shimmered with text written in light. Then the light rearranged into her voice. "I am your chronicle, forgotten one. You wrote me the day you first refused to end the story." She recoiled slightly. "That's not possible." Sigrun folded his arms. Everything is possible when memory gets bored. Arin finally reached down and touched the cover. It was warm, too warm. The instant his skin met it, he felt the pulse of something immense, not alive, but aware. His reflection in the glossy surface wasn't quite his own. The eyes looked older, the face slightly out of sync. He opens the tome. The voice said, and learns that what he calls now was already written yesterday. The book opened itself. Pages turned, though no one touched them. Every movement the trio made appeared in ink before it happened. Vetra's frown, Sigrun's sigh, the flicker of Arin's doubt, and then the next lines formed. Arin will speak next. He will say, "This isn't possible." Arin's throat tightened. Against his will, the words escaped his mouth. "This isn't possible." The ink glowed. Vetra grabbed his arm. "Stop reading." Sigrun's voice was low. "You can't stop prophecy by ignoring it, but you can change the tempo. It's memory with stage fright. It performs what it already knows." Arin turned to him. "Stage fright." Sigrun smiled faintly. "Prophecy doesn't predict. It repeats. It's the future remembering itself out loud. And sometimes when you look straight at it, it stumbles." The book twitched as if insulted. "The cursed one warns them," it said coldly. "But the goddess forgets again, as she always does. The mortal listens too late." The air darkened. The snow around them began to melt in perfect circles. The book's shadow grew long, stretching toward each of them, splitting into 3 thinner arms. Vetra drew back. "It's writing us into obedience." Sigrun shrugged. "Then we edit." He unsheathed his blade, a slender thing etched with runes that pulsed faintly to his voice. He spoke a single word, and the tip of the sword glowed. "Narrative," he said. "Meet interruption." He slashed. The light struck the tome's edge, scattering letters into the air like startled birds. For a heartbeat, silence. Then laughter. Hundreds of voices layered into one. "You cannot cut a story with steel," the tome whispered. "Only with disbelief." Arin looked at Vetra. "Then we burn it." Sigrun nodded approvingly. Excellent editorial instinct. They gathered tinder from the remnants of an abandoned camp. Wood petrified by time, brittle and dry. Vetra whispered a single command, and the aurora above bent downward, releasing a thin thread of celestial fire. The moment the flames touched the book, it screamed, not from pain, but from outrage. Words erupted from its pages in luminous streams, forming sentences that twisted around them. Arin throws into the fire. Vetra hesitates too late. Sigrun watches, smiling, because he knows this will not end it. Arin flung it into the blaze anyway. The fire surged violet and gold. The tome writhed, its cover cracking open like a shell. Letters poured out, rising into the air as burning ash. You can burn paper. The voice said, faint now, but not memory. The pages disintegrated, but the ashes didn't scatter. They began to move with purpose. The wind swirled them into patterns, forming faint glowing runes across the snow. Vetra crouched, brushing a hand across them. The symbols pulsed once, then arranged themselves into words. A direction, a command, a place. The Hollow Atlas, she read aloud. That's where it wants us to go. Sigrun crouched beside her, squinting at the faintly glowing script. Or where we already went, he said. Prophecy, remember, the echo of a choice we haven't made yet, but once will. Arin stared at the ashes, watching them twist into a map made of ember trails. So we destroyed it, and it wrote our next step anyway. Vetra nodded slowly. You can't kill a story by denying it, only by outliving it. Sigrun chuckled. Outliving stories is a definition of damnation, my dear. The ashes began to sink into the snow, carving their pattern into the ground itself. The glow spread outward, etching a path of light that vanished into the northern horizon. Vetra rose. It's showing us the next memory. Arin hesitated. Or leading us into another prophecy. Sigrun smiled, his invisible audience murmuring approval. Same difference. Prophecy is simply the past remembering its own potential. They began to walk. The snow under their feet hissed faintly, still hot from the rune fire. Above, the aurora shifted, and for a moment, Arin thought he saw letters forming in the sky, faint lines of light spelling his name, then erasing it. Do you ever feel, he asked quietly, like we're just walking through someone else's story? Vetra glanced at him. We are, but so is everyone who's ever remembered anything. Sigrun's laugh echoed softly. Ah, perfect. Keep that tone. The audience loves existential despair mixed with poetry. She ignored him. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, where the northern lights now curved into a shape, the outline of a vast compass pointing towards something unseen. As they followed the glowing path, Arin noticed the shadows cast by the dying fire were still moving, though the flames had gone out. The darkness formed words in the snow, faint and vanishing too quickly to read, as if trying to give one final warning. He thought he caught a fragment. Don't let it end again. He didn't tell the others. The tundra stretched ahead, endless and pale, but the ashes kept glowing beneath the surface, leading them forward. Every step left a faint mark that faded only after the next was made, as if time itself waited for their choices before deciding what had already happened. Hours later, when the wind had quieted and the fire's memory was gone, Sigrun stopped suddenly. He crouched and brushed snow from the ground. There, half buried, lay a single intact scrap of the tome's page. It still pulsed faintly with warmth. He lifted it, reading aloud, and when they thought the book had burned, they did not notice the storyteller keeping a single page, because he never quite believed in endings. Arin's stomach tightened. Sigrun? The storyteller smiled ruefully, folding the page into his cloak. Well, he said softly, even stage fright deserves an encore. The aurora flickered above, pale and restless. The wind began to hum again, the faint sound of pages turning somewhere far ahead, already narrating the steps they hadn't yet taken. And so they followed the runes into the north, walking inside a sentence that hadn't finished writing them. They reached the forest at dusk. Though here, dusk had forgotten which direction the sun should fall. The horizon was a wound of amber and black, bleeding upward instead of down, and the air trembled with a sound like 1,000 slow heartbeats echoing through the earth. At first, Arin thought the landscape was reflected in a lake, but then he realized the impossible truth. The trees grew upside down. Their roots arched into the sky like the fingers of the buried, tangled with sand that glittered faintly as it fell upward in slow spirals. Their trunks hung from the heavens like chandeliers of bark and memory, their branches dripping long threads of silver dust that rained upward into clouds. Roots full of sand, Sigrun murmured, tilting his head back. That's new. Gravity here seems to have an opinion. Vetra walked beneath the nearest tree. Her bare feet sank into the strange soil, soft as ash, humming faintly beneath her steps. This is the forest of unlived hours, she said quietly. Every grain that falls here is a moment that never happened, a decision unmade, a road not taken, a breath withheld. Arin reached out. The air between them shimmered like warm glass. A single grain drifted into his palm, tiny, luminous, weightless. Inside it, he saw a flicker, a small boy running through fields of grass, laughter spilling from a mouth that wasn't his. He gasped, "That was me?" "No," Vetra said softly. "That was the you who chose not to leave home, the you who never walked into the storm. Every possibility that died before it could begin comes here to hang from the roots of these trees." Sigrun let out a low whistle. A graveyard of choices. The audience will love this scene, tragic and philosophical, their favorite flavor. Vetra ignored him. She turned slowly, her gaze sweeping the inverted forest. The branches swayed without wind, releasing glimmering streams of time that rose like smoke. "When the gods first built this place," she said, "it was meant to store the overflow of creation, the unused hours, the forgotten lives. But memory is a jealous gardener. It grows even where nothing should." They wandered deeper. The forest pulsed faintly around them, the rhythm syncing with their footsteps. As they walked, Arin noticed something uncanny. The further they went, the more familiar the falling grains became. He recognized faces, some from dreams, some from memories he didn't think were his. Entire cities flickered briefly within the translucent sand, rising and vanishing again. Each time, the loss hit him like a soft blow to the chest. "How many lives are in one tree?" he asked. Vetra looked up. "As many as the tree dares to remember." She stopped suddenly. Before her hung a colossal trunk, thick as a mountain, its roots stretching across the horizon. But it was what rested inside the roots that froze her. Dozens of faces glimmered within the sand, human, divine, in between, flowing upward and dissolving into light. And among them, one face stood out. Hers. Arin followed her gaze. "Vetra." She didn't answer. She stepped closer, trembling. In the shifting sand within the roots, her reflection aged rapidly. Silver hair, wrinkled hands, eyes dimming with fatigue. The grains carried her image through centuries in seconds, a goddess growing old, dying quietly, dissolving into nothing. Vetra reached out, her hand trembling. "That's me," she whispered. "That's my end." Sigrun's cloak stirred as his invisible audience gasped. A revelation. Gods die when they remember too much. The irony writes itself. Vetra's voice trembled. "I didn't think it possible." Arin turned to her. "You've seen death before." "Yes," she said, "but never mine." The sand began to pulse brighter, responding to her nearness. The older version of her looked out from the grain storm with eyes that were both sorrow and peace. Her lips moved silently, but Arin could almost read them. "Let go." Vetra stumbled back, clutching her chest. Her heartbeat, that fragile human rhythm, thundered wildly. "It's calling me," she said. "It wants me to finish remembering." Arin caught her arm. "Then don't." "I have to," she whispered. "This is what I became mortal for. To remember what gods are forbidden to." Sigrun circled them slowly, his expression half curious, half afraid. "Careful, goddess." The last god who looked too closely at her own ending turned into her own worshippers. A tragic encore. Vetra ignored him. She stepped forward again, pressing her hand into the rising stream of sand. The particles clung to her skin, glowing as they sank into her veins. Her breath caught. The air thickened. Time folded inward. Arin saw her eyes roll back, flashes of light flooding through her, memory spilling out in reverse. Empires born, undone, born again. The first stars kindling in the void. The sound of prayers whispered by voices not yet evolved. Then he heard her scream. It wasn't pain, it was awakening. The forest reacted. Every upside-down tree shuddered. The sand flowing faster. roaring like a reverse waterfall. The sky above fractured into mosaics of light, showing countless timelines branching outward. For a moment, Aaron saw all of them, the world that might have been, the world that still could be. And in the center of it all, Vetra stood glowing like the heart of a dying sun. He ran to her, but she turned before he could reach her. Her hair was white as salt, her face older, not with age as mortals knew it, but with understanding. "Aaron," she said, and her voice sounded like wind through a cathedral. "I remember everything." "What did you see?" he asked. She looked upward, at the glowing roots that dripped centuries. "I saw the first silence and the last breath. The gods will die not by sword or curse, but by memory. Each time we recall what we've erased, we unravel a little more. We weren't made to hold so much truth." Aaron stepped closer, gently touching her hand. "Then let it go." She shook her head. "No. Someone must remember, or all this," she gestured to the vast, inverted forest, "becomes meaningless repetition. But now I understand why mortals forget. Forgetting is mercy." Sigrin's voice was uncharacteristically quiet. "And remembering is punishment." Vetra smiled faintly. "No, it's balance." The sandstorm began to settle. From the glowing grains above, one last image drifted down. Her older self, now smiling serenely. The grain landed softly in Vetra's palm. It pulsed once, and she closed her hand around it. "This," she said, "is the end I will someday earn. A death not a power lost, but memory fulfilled." Aaron looked up at the countless trees, their roots shimmering with unborn futures. "Then every god is already dying. They just don't know it yet." Sigrun nodded. "Mortals decay through flesh. Gods decay through remembrance. One dissolves into dust, the other into story. Both in the end become ash." Vetra exhaled. "And yet both are beautiful." The forest quieted. The upside-down roots stopped shedding sand, as if listening. Then, one by one, the trees began to turn, slowly righting themselves, roots sinking into the earth, branches rising toward the heavens where they belonged. Aaron stared, awed. "You're fixing them." "Not fixing," Vetra said softly. "Forgiving." The inverted world righted itself completely. Time began to flow forward again, though slower here, gentle, uncertain, as if relearning how to move. Vetra opened her palm and blew softly. The single grain of sand, her own death, scattered into the wind, carried away into the night. Sigrun smiled faintly, hearing his audience sigh in collective wonder. "They'll remember this scene," he said. "The day a goddess watched herself die, and chose to live anyway." Vetra looked at Aaron, her eyes still glowing faintly, but softened by humanity. "Perhaps dying isn't the end," she said. "Perhaps it's the moment a god finally understands what being human means." Aaron reached for her hand. "Then maybe that's what the afterlife really is, remembering enough to be reborn." They stood together as the last grains of unlived time drifted upward, vanishing into the newly calm sky. And when the wind finally stilled, the forest sang, not with prophecy or grief, but with quiet acceptance. The sound was like breathing, like pages closing softly after a long, unfinished story. Far above, the roots glimmered faintly, as if a billion lives were whispering their thanks before turning to light. And beneath them, Vetra's heart beat once more, steady, human, eternal. The village appeared at the edge of Forgotten Valley, veiled by mist that shimmered like breath upon glass. The air there was neither cold nor warm, and even the wind moved hesitantly, as though uncertain it was still permitted to exist. Aaron saw the faint outline of roofs first, crooked, small, childlike. Then he noticed the silence. No birds, no footsteps, no rustle of leaves. Only a strange rhythm, like the beating of tiny hearts suspended in waiting. They entered through an arch of pale stone covered in carvings that looked half erased by forgetfulness. Each symbol shifted when Aaron looked away, reforming into something slightly different, the alphabet of memory losing its balance. Inside, the streets were narrow and clean, but there were no signs of life until they heard a sound, a laugh, soft and distant, echoing in slow motion. Children. They emerged one by one from the mist. Dozens of them, barefoot, ageless, their eyes vast and luminous like polished glass. Their hair floated slightly as though underwater. None of them spoke, yet their gazes carried the weight of centuries. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10. Veteran knelt, her expression gentle but heavy with awe. "They're echoes," she whispered. "Fragments of forgotten beginnings. Children no one ever remembered long enough for them to grow." Sigrin's cloak rustled, his invisible audience murmuring uneasily. "A village of unremembered youth," he muttered. "Oh, they'll love this image. It's the perfect paradox. Immortality through neglect." Arin crouched near one of the children, a small girl clutching a wooden doll carved from something that looked like bone. "Hi," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl tilted her head. She blinked once, twice. "Name?" He smiled gently. "Yes. What do they call you?" She looked at him as though the question itself were a riddle. "No one calls." Arin's throat tightened. He looked around. "Do you have parents?" The children glanced at one another. The same girl shook her head. "They left. Or maybe they never came." Vetra closed her eyes. "When no one remembers, time freezes," she said. "They're trapped in the moment before someone first forgets them." A boy with hollow eyes stepped forward. "Is forgetting bad?" Sigrun smiled faintly. "It depends who you ask, little one. Some of us make a living from it." Vetra shot him a look sharp enough to silence a chorus. She turned to the boy and knelt to his level. "No, it isn't bad," she said softly. "It just stops things from growing. It keeps everything half-born." He nodded slowly, as though memorizing the words. "Half-born," he echoed, and then pointed at the sky. "Like that." Arin followed his gesture. The sky above the village flickered like a broken lantern. Half day, half night, blinking between moments. The sun and moon shared the same horizon, caught mid-argument. Every time the light changed, the shadows of the children shifted, and Arin saw something dreadful. Their shapes didn't quite match their bodies. Some shadows were smaller, some older, some missing entirely. "These children aren't truly alive," he whispered. "They're waiting to be." Vetra's expression softened with something maternal and mournful all at once. She stood, lifting her hand. "There's only one way to unfreeze a soul," she said. "Give it a name." Sigrun raised an eyebrow. "A bold experiment. What if they shatter under the weight of identity?" "Then they'll finally rest," she replied. She stepped into the center of the village square. The children gathered around her, their eyes wide with quiet expectation, as if sensing that whatever would happen next had already been written in the marrow of the world. Vetra looked to Arin. "Help me?" He nodded. She extended her hand toward the first child, the girl with the wooden doll. "You," she said gently. "You are Alara." The moment the name left her lips, the girl gasped. Her body shimmered faintly, a soft glow spreading through her skin like sunrise through frost. A sound burst from her, unfamiliar, raw. She began to cry. Arin took a step forward. "She's crying." Vetra nodded. "Because she's real now." The other children watched, astonished. Their eyes flickered with envy, curiosity, fear. Vetra turned to the next. "You are Terran," she said to the boy who'd asked about forgetting. His chest rose sharply. A heartbeat, his first. He laughed once, a sound that broke halfway between joy and grief. "It hurts," he said, touching his heart. "That's what it means to begin," she answered. One by one, she named them. Leora, Mikkel, Anen, Syrah. Each name fell like a drop of rain into dry soil, awakening something buried. The children began to move differently, clumsy, uncertain, as if learning the weight of their own existence. Sigrin's cloak fluttered wildly, the whispers within rising into a chaotic chorus. "Names!" he exclaimed. "Ah, the oldest magic. The audience never tires of the moment something nameless learns to suffer." Arin turned sharply. "You talk like this isn't real." Sigrun smiled wearily. "Everything's real if it hurts enough." Vetra ignored them both. She knelt as the last child approached. The smallest, a boy barely taller than her knee. His eyes were pools of reflection, showing everything but himself. She touched his cheek. "And you, she said softly. You are Indar. The name resonated like a bell struck inside the bones of the earth. Every child froze. Then, as one, they began to cry, soft at first, then louder, until the air trembled with the sound. It wasn't sorrow. It was release. The sky reacted. The flicker above steadied. The sun blinked once, then committed. Rising fully for first time in ages, the light poured across the valley, washing the village in gold. The air, long stagnant, rushed outward like a hell breath finally exhaled. Vetra stood trembling, the glow of her skin dimming, as if she'd given away a part of herself. Arin caught her before she fell. What happened? She smiled weakly. They're part-time again. I gave them back to it. Sigrun looked around, his voice quieter than usual. You can feel it, can't you? The world's heartbeat. It skipped forward for the first time since the gods froze the dawn. The children were laughing now, their tears drying under the warmth of a real sun. They ran through the village, chasing their own shadows, which now matched them perfectly. Some stumbled and scraped their knees. One began to bleed and stare at the red astonished, then delighted. I'm hurt, she exclaimed with childish wonder. Arin smiled. Congratulations. You're alive. Vetra wiped her eyes, though she didn't remember crying. They'll grow now. Age. Forget me. That's the point, isn't it? Arin said. To be forgotten so something else can continue? She looked at him for a long moment. Yes, she whispered. That's the point. Sigrun's invisible audience murmured with unease, as if unsure whether to applaud or grieve. Time continues, he said. But you realize, dear goddess, that every time you restart, you move closer to your own end. Memory restores motion, but it also erodes eternity. Veteran nodded. Then let it. What's the worth of endless life if it exists outside the flow that gives meaning to death? The ground beneath them began to shift subtly, not violently, but with the slow, majestic rhythm of reawakening. Grass emerged from cracks between the cobblestones. A breeze carried the scent of rain, though no storm approached. The valley was breathing again. Arin turned his face toward the sky. The sun was brighter than he remembered, golden, forgiving. He felt warmth seep into his bones, melting the frost that had lingered in his soul since the frozen river, the mirror, the beasts. Vetra watched the children scatter into the meadows beyond the village, their laughter echoing into distance. She felt a pang, maternal and divine, all at once. They'll grow, she said softly, and someday they'll die. Arin took her hand. And someday, maybe, someone will remember them again. For the first time, Vetra smiled, truly smiled, not with serenity or wisdom, but with gratitude. Then the circle will be complete. Sigrun looked up at the steady sky, his expression unreadable. So this is what progress feels like, he said. Strange. The audience won't recognize it without tragedy. Vetra glanced back. Then they'll have to learn, too. The wind carried away the last echoes of the children's laughter, and the valley settled into peaceful silence. Yet it was no longer the dead quiet of stagnation. It was a stillness that follows motion, the silence that waits for the next heartbeat. And when that heartbeat came, faint but certain, it wasn't only the world that felt it. The gods themselves stirred somewhere far above, startled by the sudden continuation of time. The sun moved a fraction higher. The clouds drifted. A leaf fell, and for the first time since the beginning of their long journey, the future existed again. They came to it at the end of all sound. The canyon stretched before them like a mouth open in awe or hunger, miles wide, infinitely deep, filled not with darkness but with layers of shimmering air. From within that abyss rose the faintest tremor, the residue of voices long spent. Each vibration was a half-memory, each echo a remnant of something once spoken but since denied. There was no wind. Even Sigrun's ever-murmuring audience had gone quiet, as though too reverent or too afraid to speak here. The silence was not absence but presence, thick, tangible, dense enough to feel pressing against the eardrums, demanding humility. Arin looked down into the canyon and saw ripples of light moving below. They weren't reflections of stars but of moments, flickering like candle flames seen through deep water. The longer he looked, the more he realized what he was seeing. voices fossilized into light. "Where are we?" he whispered, though even whispering felt like vandalism. Vetra stood beside him, her eyes soft with recognition and fear. "This is the Bridge of Silence," she said. "It was built by the first gods after they learned that even eternity needs distance between its echoes." Sigrin's smile was thin, uncertain. "A bridge made from quiet. How poetic and how doomed." "Every step across it," Vetra continued, "calls forth the shadows of possibilities, the memories that might have been if the world had chosen differently." Arin looked up. "Then we'll see ghosts?" "Not ghosts," she said gently. "Echoes of what you never became." The air trembled. The canyon pulsed like a sleeping giant exhaling. Across it stretched the bridge itself. If it could be called a bridge, it had no visible supports, no ropes or planks. It was a narrow ribbon of translucent air, glimmering faintly with silver light, humming softly like a single musical note held forever. Arin hesitated at the edge. His reflection, or rather, the idea of his reflection, shimmered on its surface, slightly delayed. "It doesn't look solid," he said. Vetra smiled faintly. "It isn't. It's made of everything that's been unsaid." Sigrun chuckled softly. "Then I should fall through immediately." She looked back at him. "No, those who speak too much have no silence left to lose. They walk easily. It's the ones who kept words buried who risk the drop." Arin took a breath and placed one foot onto the bridge. The silence accepted him like water taking in light. No resistance, no echo. Then came the second step. A sound emerged, not from the bridge, but from inside him. It was laughter, his own laughter, older, warmer, belonging to a version of him that had never been born. He froze. Vetra stepped beside him. "Don't stop," she said. "If you pause, you'll linger too long in the echo, and it will become real." "What was that?" Arin asked, still shaken. "Memory imagining itself forward." Sigrun said softly, "The bridge is showing you what might have been." Arin took another cautious step. The laughter grew clearer. He turned, and there, walking beside him on the shimmering path, was himself, older by a decade, his eyes calm, his posture certain. A small hand clung to his. A child, a little girl, dark-haired and laughing as though she'd known him forever. Arin's breath caught. "Who?" The older Arin looked up, smiling kindly, as though meeting a beloved stranger. "You," he said simply. The child looked at him too, her eyes wide with trust. "Papa?" Arin stepped back, trembling. "No, I don't. I never." Vetra's hand brushed his arm. "It's not a lie," she whispered. "It's a path you didn't take. The bridge lets every silence speak." The vision lingered. He wanted to reach for them, to feel the child's warmth, to know if she was real. But as he lifted his hand, the image trembled. "You can't touch what you didn't choose," Sigrun murmured behind him. "But it can still touch you." The older Arin smiled again, then knelt beside the child. Together, they faded into mist. The bridge rippled beneath his feet, whispering, "You could have stayed." Arin closed his eyes. "That wasn't mercy," he said. "No," Vetra agreed. "It was truth. Mercy comes later." They continued forward. Each step changed the air around them, the bridge reacting like a harp string struck by invisible fingers. Now it was Vetra's turn to falter. Her reflection stretched across the translucent path, and within it appeared another her, not radiant and divine, but human. A woman in simple clothes, her eyes tired but peaceful, her hands stained with ink and soil. She stood before a cottage, smiling. Someone stood beside her, a man with a kind face, holding her hand as if it were the most natural act in existence. Vetra stared, unable to breathe. "He loves me," she said softly. Sigrin's tone was tender for once. "You sound surprised." "I was never meant for love," she whispered, "only for remembering it." The human Vetra laughed, brushing hair from her forehead. A child's voice called from inside the cottage, and the woman turned, her eyes full of warmth so deep that even the goddess flinched. "Don't look too long," Sigrun said. "The bridge confuses longing with permanence." But she couldn't look away. For the first time in eternity, Vetra saw herself living, not merely existing. A life without worship, without duty. A small, finite joy. When the vision dissolved, she wept silently. The tears fell but made no sound. They disappeared before touching the bridge. Aaron took her hand. She squeezed it once, as if to confirm he was still real. They walked on. Behind them, the bridge rebuilt itself, erasing every trace of where they'd stepped, as though the act of crossing rewrote the past. Ahead, the canyon deepened, its echoes growing louder, voices murmuring, crying, laughing. Sigrun trailed them, his cloak heavy with whispers from his unseen audience. "They're watching," he muttered. "They want to know which illusions you'll fall for." "Why?" Aaron asked. "Because every story needs a temptation." The bridge stretched for miles, yet distance meant nothing here. Each step folded the world differently. The canyon beneath was no longer static. Now it churned like a living thing, waves of light surging upward before collapsing into themselves. Aaron saw faces within the glow, his father, his brother, strangers who might have been him in other lives. One version wore armor, another carried a quill, another lay still in a field of flowers. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "how many versions of us had to die for this one to exist?" Sigrun chuckled darkly. "All of them. The multiverse is just a memory of every choice that lost the argument." Vetra turned, her face pale, and each of those lost choices becomes an echo that tries to find its way back. The bridge groaned. A low sound like distant thunder rolled across the canyon. From below, faint shapes began to rise, half transparent, walking upward along invisible threads of memory. They were the echo forms, translucent figures shaped from possibility, their eyes blank, their movements hesitant, like marionettes discovering autonomy. "What happens if they reach us?" Aaron asked. "They'll try to merge," Vetra said. "They'll want to be whole again, even if it kills the version that survived." He drew his blade instinctively. "Then we keep walking." "Always," she said. "That's the only way through." They began to move faster, the bridge trembling beneath their feet. With every step, echoes rose higher, whispering fragments of forgotten sentences. "Stay. Turn back. Remember me." One voice stood out. It was Aaron's own. He stopped cold. The air ahead shimmered, and from it stepped another Aaron. Not older or younger, but different. His face carried the calm of acceptance, the peace of someone who had never left his village, never lost his mother, never carried the burden of Vetra's quest. "You don't have to keep going," this other Aaron said. "You could rest. Live. Be kind to yourself." The real Aaron's grip tightened on his sword. "You're not me. I'm the version who forgave himself," the echo said, "the one who chose stillness over salvation." For a moment, the real Aaron wanted to believe him. The man's serenity was intoxicating. He looked at Vetra, her eyes glistening with understanding. "You can't talk to him," she warned. "He's not wrong," Aaron said quietly. "Maybe peace is what we're supposed to find. Peace that demands surrender isn't peace," she said. "It's extinction." The echo sighed sadly, stepping closer. "Then you'll keep walking into loss. You'll die for a story that forgets you the moment it ends." "That's fine," Aaron said, "as long as the story moves forward." He stepped through the echo. It dissolved instantly, a ripple of light scattering into the air. The bridge brightened again, stable once more. Sigrun exhaled, half laughing, half shaken. "You just killed your most persuasive audience." "I didn't kill him," Aaron murmured. "I let him rest." They pressed onward. The bridge narrowed until they could walk only single file. The air turned dense, heavy with anticipation. Vetra's form flickered slightly, the strain of her memories weighing on her new mortal pulse. "Don't stop," Aaron urged. "I won't," she said, "but the bridge is showing me too much." "What do you see?" "Everything I denied myself. Every love I turned away because I believed gods weren't meant to need." She glanced at him then, and something unspoken passed between them. Fragile, dangerous. Sigrun noticed and smiled ruefully. "Careful," he said. "Emotion writes faster than intention. The bridge might mistake your feelings for prophecy." But it was too late. The air ahead shimmered again, and now a new scene unfurled before them. Vetra and Arn standing together beneath a sky unbroken by divine ruin, their hands intertwined, faces aged but content. They were home somewhere. A cottage, a hearth, laughter in another room. Arn froze. That's... She nodded, her voice breaking. I know. The vision was so vivid that for a moment he smelled the wood smoke, heard the faint sound of rain on the roof. He could feel the warmth of her hand in his. Then he felt the bridge trembling, cracking under the weight of their longing. Sigrun shouted, If you love your illusion, you'll fall into it forever. Arn tore his gaze away. Vetra did the same, though it broke something deep within her to do so. The vision faded, dissolving into mist, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt sacred. They kept walking. Each step after that was harder, because now they knew what the bridge could offer, not nightmares, but mercies too beautiful to refuse, the temptation of wholeness. And yet they walked. Hours passed, or centuries, on the bridge of silence. Time was neither. The canyon below continued its slow, luminous breathing. Occasionally, a voice rose from it, not pleading, not accusing, just remembering. Sigrun's face softened. I've told 1,000 tales about redemption, he said quietly, but I never realized how quiet sounds when it's real. Vetra looked back at him. Stories end with silence, because silence is what truth sounds like. Finally, they reached the middle, a place that was both nowhere and everywhere. The bridge widened into a circle, a small plateau of faintly glowing glass. Beneath it, the abyss seemed infinite. Above it, the sky was cracked with threads of light, leaking through from forgotten heavens. This is the heart of the bridge, Vetra said. Here, silence remembers itself. Arn stepped to the edge and looked down. Within the glass below, he saw not reflections but histories, the sum of every decision that had ever led him here. He saw the boy who had buried his mother, the wanderer who had walked into the ruins, the man who had chosen not to stop. He also saw something else, a future version of himself standing in another place, alone. He didn't understand it, but the sight filled him with a calm kind of dread. What happens if we fall? He asked. Then the story ends here, Vetra said simply, and the echoes will go on without us. He nodded. Then we won't fall. They rested there for a while, the first pause they'd allowed themselves in what felt like lifetimes. Sigrun sat cross-legged near the edge, his cloak whispering softly. The audience is restless, he said with a faint grin. They think nothing is happening. Arn smiled. Maybe that's the point. Vetra closed her eyes. Sometimes the story needs a breathe. The silence around them deepened, almost kind. It was a silence after music, after confession, not emptiness, but fulfillment. Then, without warning, the bridge itself changed. The hum grew louder, and from the edges of the circle rose pillars of light, forming shapes, not human, not divine, but linguistic. The bridge was speaking now, translating itself into sound. The voice that came was neither male nor female, but the resonance of all memory condensed into a single tone. You have carried echoes across silence, it said. You have walked through the versions that longed to replace you. Why? Arn looked to Vetra, but she said nothing. He stepped forward. Because the story isn't over. And if it never ends, then we walk forever, he said. Better that than stillness. The voice trembled, almost like laughter. Few answer that way. Most beg to become echoes again. They think the past is safer. Vetra's eyes opened, glowing faintly. The past is a cage, even for gods. Then cross, the bridge said. But know this, silence is not your enemy. It is what waits when every word has been spent. The pillars of light faded, leaving them in soft luminescence. The path ahead reappeared, narrower than before. Sigrun rose, brushing dust from his knees. Well, he said, at least it liked your answer. They continued, step by deliberate step. The air grew lighter, almost fragile, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Halfway across the final span, Arn glanced over his shoulder and froze. Behind them, the bridge was unraveling. Each step they'd taken was dissolving. swallowed by the same silence that had once held them. He turned to Vetra. It's disappearing. She nodded. It always does. The past erases itself to keep the present from collapsing. Sigrun smirked. Narrative housekeeping. Faster, Arin said. They broke into a run, though even running here made no sound. Their feet struck light instead of matter. The far side of the canyon was growing closer, but the bridge was vanishing just as quickly, disassembling itself behind them like a story closing its final chapter. For a moment, Arin thought they wouldn't make it. Then the silence beneath them erupted, not in noise, but in color. A burst of pure white radiance launched them forward. They stumbled onto solid ground, breathless. The moment Vetra's foot touched earth, the bridge behind them vanished completely, leaving only still air. No echo, no return. They turned back together. The canyon was silent again, patient and eternal. Sigrun broke the quiet first. Well, he said softly, they wanted an ending. We gave them one. Vetra shook her head. No, we gave them a continuation. Arin looked out over the abyss, the memory of the child's laughter and the vision of the cottage still lingering like warmth on his skin. We saw what we could have been, he said quietly, and still we walked. That's why you're alive, Sigrun said, because you keep walking. The goddess smiled faintly. And that, she whispered, is why even gods envy mortals. The wind returned at last, soft, tentative, as though relearning its own motion. It brushed past them, carrying faint echoes of the laughter, the tears, the unspoken promises left behind. Vetra closed her eyes and listened. The bridge is gone, she said, but the silence remains. Arin nodded. Then let it. Silence isn't the end. It's just the space where the next story begins. They stood at the canyon's edge for a while, 3 travelers looking into a void that no longer frightened them. Behind them lay everything unlived. Ahead, the uncertain glow of what might still come. And when they finally turned to walk onward, when their first steps stirred the dust of a land that hadn't felt movement in centuries, the world trembled, not in fear, but in anticipation. For the first time since memory had learned to speak, silence smiled. They walked for what felt like the length of memory itself, through lands that had forgotten how to echo. The air had grown heavier since the bridge, not oppressive, but solemn, like a temple holding its breath. Even Sigrun's invisible audience had quieted, perhaps out of awe, perhaps out of dread. When the horizon finally broke, it was not with dawn, but with architecture. At first, Arin thought it was a mountain range. The shapes were colossal, black against the fading sky, jagged and endless. But as they drew nearer, he saw order within the chaos. Patterns, arches, towering spines of marble and glass half buried in mist. It was a city of shells, a ruin so vast that it devoured the horizon. Vetra stopped, her hand pressed against her chest, as if steadying her new heartbeat. We've reached the archive, she said softly. Arin frowned. Archive of what? Sigrun's expression darkened. Of endings. Every world that has ever existed leaves behind its final line, a single sentence that closes its story. This is where they rest. The air pulsed faintly, vibrating with countless whispers too quiet to form words. Arin felt them brushing the edges of his thoughts. Fragments of closure, despair, forgiveness. Each one ended in silence. The ruins towered above them, like a dead cathedral to language itself. Massive shelves rose from the ground, stretching skyward until they disappeared into shadow. Between them drifted torn pages made of light, each one glowing faintly as if still breathing the memory of a story long gone. They entered through what had once been a gate, an arch carved with letters from every alphabet that had ever existed. Some were still alive, others extinct. Together, they formed a phrase that shimmered faintly as they passed beneath it. All stories end, even those that pretend to continue. Inside, the air changed. It was cool, dry, filled with a scent of dust that wasn't dust, but the echo of vanished words. The shelves hummed faintly, each one alive with invisible currents. And on every shelf, a single object, not a book, but a line. Each was preserved differently. Some floated like threads of smoke. Others were etched into crystal, burned into metal, carved into bone. Some sang softly to themselves. Others wept in silence. Aaron approached the nearest one. It was suspended in midair, a single sentence written in golden script. And so they became light again. The letters shimmered faintly, vibrating with the warmth of a happy ending. As he reached out, the sentence pulsed like a heartbeat and whispered a final sigh before turning still again. He stepped back, shivering. Each of these is the last breath of a universe. Vetra finished for him. Sigrin's invisible audience murmured with delight, their whispers swelling like wind. "Ah, we've arrived at the theater's curtain call," he said. "The perfect place for irony." Vetra turned slowly, her gaze distant. "I've been here before," she said. "Long ago, when I was still whole. This was where I learned what gods fear most, not oblivion, but punctuation." They wandered through the aisles. Some shelves were immaculate, others broken, their lines scattered like bones. Aaron passed a line that glowed crimson. No one remembered their names, but the stars did. Another written in black flame. They chose mercy, and so the fire was kind. Each one struck something deep within him. Tiny needles of emotion, both alien and familiar. He wondered which world had ended that way, and whether anyone there had known it was the last sentence they would ever speak. As they moved deeper into the archive, the light dimmed. The air grew colder, the hum lower. The shelves here were ancient, eroded by time beyond time. Many of the lines were cracked or fading, their words barely legible. Aaron felt drawn toward one in particular. It hovered at chest height, trembling faintly, as if aware of his approach. The script was simple, not ornate like the others, but written in his own hand. He froze. "Vetra, Sigrun." They turned. Aaron pointed. "This one, it's mine." Vetra's eyes widened. She stepped closer. "Ours," she corrected softly. Sigrun leaned in, his voice reverent. "Every traveler eventually finds their line. The archive keeps them ready." The words shone dimly, almost shy. They almost succeeded. The simplicity of it made Aaron's stomach twist. Almost. A single word heavy as judgment. He stared at it, feeling something tighten in his chest. "That's how it ends," he whispered. "After everything, that's what's left of us." Vetra touched the air near the sentence, her fingers trembling. The archive doesn't lie. It records what was, not what might still be. "But it's not finished," he said. "We're still walking." Sigrun sighed, his invisible audience murmuring their approval. The archive writes its lines when the outcome is inevitable, not when it's over. Perhaps it believes inevitability has already arrived. Aaron's jaw clenched. Then it's wrong. He stepped closer, the words pulsing faintly in response. The golden letters reflected in his eyes like distant stars. He reached out, and the moment his fingertips brushed them, he heard the echo of their own voices from another reality. They almost succeeded. The sentence carried emotion, fatigue, sorrow, a fragile kind pride. It wasn't cruel, it was resigned. Aaron whispered, almost as just a softer word for failure. Vetra met his gaze. "Almost means we tried." He shook his head. "Almost means we weren't enough." The silence that followed was unbearable. Around them, other shells began to stir. The nearby lines quivered, reacting to his anger, their letters shifting nervously. Words flickered in and out of existence like fireflies trapped in wind. Sigrun stepped back, muttering, "Careful. The archive doesn't like being contradicted." "I don't care." Aaron reached out again, this time not to touch but to tear. His fingers closed around the line as if it were tangible cloth. The light resisted, trembling, stretching, but then came apart with sound like a sigh being broken. The letters scattered, dissolving into sparks that drifted upward and vanished into the endless air. Vetra gasped. "Aaron, what have you done?" "I tore our ending," he said. "Let fate write another." The air shuddered. Every shelf in the archive groaned at once. Lines began to flicker, their words stuttering like voices caught in panic. Some dissolved completely. Others multiplied, rewriting themselves in frantic succession. They lived forever. They burned before dawn. They never met. They almost succeeded. Over and over, the same phrase returned, desperate to anchor itself again. The ground shook. Dust fell from the high arches, and the faint whisper of 10,000 endings turned into a roar. Sigrun stumbled back, his cloak alive with the terrified murmurs of his audience. You've broken chronology. The archive's grammar is collapsing. Vetra grabbed Arn's arm. You can't change what's been written. Then I'll make it remember differently, he shouted. He reached for another line, tear it free, then another and another, the air filled with fragments of finality. Forever, never end again. Each torn word burned away like snow and fire. A light flared across the hall, not golden, but blinding white, swallowing color and shape. The shells vibrated violently. For an instant, Arn saw the ghostly silhouettes of other worlds flickering in the air. Oceans reversed, suns collapsing, people mid-breath. Each reality trembled at the loss of its closure. Vetra's voice was distant, echoing through the chaos. You don't understand. Without endings, stories unravel. Arn turned to her, his eyes fierce. Then maybe it's time they did. The light exploded outward. When vision returned, they were no longer in the same hall. The shells had shifted, rearranged themselves into a labyrinth. Some stretched into the horizon. Others bent in impossible curves, looping back into themselves. The air was filled with a flutter of loose sentences, each one seeking a place to land. Some brushed past Arn's face. He caught one briefly, reading the words before it dissolved. She forgave the sea. Another drifted by. No one ever found the bones. And another, he walked until the world forgot his footsteps. Each fragment carried a weight of reality, each one the closure of an entire universe now unmoored. Vetra clutched her chest, pale with exhaustion. They're dying, she whispered. Worlds without endings can't stay whole. They'll keep unraveling until there's nothing but noise. Sigrun's laughter was thin, almost hysterical. Noise, yes. The first language. Perhaps you've done them a favor. Boy, freed them from coherence. Arn ignored him. He was staring at the empty space where their line had once floated. The absence radiated like a wound. Maybe this is what freedom looks like, he said softly. Blank space. Vetra shook her head. Freedom is an erasure. It's the right to choose what comes next. He turned to her. Then help me write it. She hesitated. You would write your own ending? No, he said. Our continuation. Sigrun tilted his head. Now that, he said, is heresy of the highest narrative order. Do it. Vetra stepped forward. The air around her shimmered, the faint glow of her divinity trembling within her mortal veins. If we write anew, she said, the archive will resist. It exists to preserve finality. It will try to silence us. Arn smiled faintly. Let it try. They knelt together in the dust of fallen letters. Arn reached into the air where their line had been. The void hummed softly, expectant. Vetra whispered, What shall we write? He thought for a long moment. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke. They began again. The air responded immediately. The void rippled, rejecting the phrase like a body refusing foreign blood. The letters trembled, bending backward, struggling to erase themselves. Arn gritted his teeth. Hold it. Vetra joined him, her hands over his, their voices blending. They began again. The sentence stabilized, faint but glowing. The shells around him trembled, and the whispering of dying worlds grew softer, listening. The line pulsed once, and then miraculously stayed. Sigrun exhaled. Awed. You did it. You rewrote destiny with an opening line. Vetra smiled weakly. Not an opening, a refusal to end. The entire archive went still. Dust hung in the air like stars suspended mid-collapse. For a heartbeat, the universe seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to continue. Then, slowly, the shell began to hum again. The ruined lines started rearranging themselves. Where once had been endings, new phrases began to appear, softer, uncertain, still forming. Arn stood, helping Vetra to her feet. Together, they watched as the first rewritten sentences took shape. They forgave what was unfinished. The wound learned to sing. Time turned its face and smiled. The archive was no longer a graveyard. It was becoming something else, a nursery of beginnings. Sigrun stared around, astonished. "You've changed the rules," he said. "You've made the last word yield to the first." Vetra looked upward, her voice trembling. "We've given the universe permission to dream again." The ground beneath them shifted, not collapsing, but unfolding, as though space itself were stretching to accommodate this impossible act. Arin turned back toward where the sentence now shone, small, defiant, radiant. They began again. He felt something in his chest ease for the first time in what felt like eternity. "We did it," he whispered. Vetra smiled. "No," she said. "We only started." But even as she spoke, the air began to hum with warning. The archive was not entirely grateful. Deep within its endless halls, something ancient stirred. The original keeper, the intelligence that ensured every narrative ended properly. The shells quaked. A low vibration rolled through the air, and a voice rose, vast, emotionless, neither hostile nor kind. "Who writes without permission?" Sigrun's eyes widened. "Ah, the librarian wakes." The voice filled the space, echoing from every direction. "Endings are not yours to alter. Return the line." Vetra's aura flared. "No, then you defy purpose." "We redefine it," Arin said. The silence that followed was absolute. Then the entire archive screamed, a chorus of worlds, of stories, of memories both dying and reborn. The light surged. Pages burst from the shelves, whirling around them like a storm of wings. Letters melted, reformed, collided into new constellations. Vetra grabbed Arin's hand. "Run." They fled through the aisles as the universe's last library tore itself apart. Sentences exploded into fragments, forming rivers of glowing text that flowed across the floor. Some wrapped around their ankles, whispering temptations. Stay, read, end. Arin forced himself forward. "Keep going." Sigrun laughed even as chaos closed in. "Do you realize what we've done? We've made eternity improvise." They reached the shattered gate, the archway they had entered through now flickering violently between alphabets. Above it, the inscription had changed. "All stories end, unless someone loves them enough to continue." They crossed beneath it just as the archive collapsed behind them, imploding into a single burst of white light. When the glare faded, they stood outside again, the ruins gone, replaced by an empty plain under a new sky. The stars above were rearranged, subtly different. Some glowed brighter. Others had never been there before. The air smelled clean, unburdened. Sigrun stood silent for once, his cloak still. Then he smiled faintly. "Well," he said, "it seems the author's lost control." Vetra looked upward. "No," she whispered. "The author just learned to listen." Arin gazed at the stars, feeling the pulse of possibility humming beneath his skin. Somewhere, countless worlds were breathing again, their final lines rewritten, their stories stretching forward into new chapters. He reached into his pocket and found a single fragment of parchment clinging to his palm, a remnant from the archive, faintly glowing. He unfolded it and read the words written there in his own handwriting. They almost succeeded. He smiled, then tore it once more, gently this time, and let the pieces scatter into the wind. Vetra watched them drift away, her voice soft. "What do you think the new line will be?" He looked at her, the horizon reflected in his eyes. "Whatever we decide to live." The wind carried the torn words upward, dissolving them into starlight. One by one, new constellations flickered into being, each one shaped like a letter, as if the night itself had started writing. Sigrun bowed slightly to sky. "Encore," he said. "Always an encore." And so they walked again, into a world that no longer knew how to end, beneath a sky that had begun to remember how to begin. Aye! The sky reversed. The first sign that the world was dying again came quietly. No thunder, no divine decree, only snow beginning to fall the wrong way. At first, Arin thought it was wind confusion, but the flakes didn't hesitate or swirl. They rose deliberately, as though drawn by something above the clouds. Each one shimmered with faint light, catching reflections of scenes that had not yet happened. He reached out, and a single flake landed on his glove before drifting upward. Inside it, he saw himself walking through a forest he hadn't yet entered. "Vetra," he murmured. "Look." The goddess turned her face skyward. The aurora had dimmed. The heavens now bled color upward instead of down. Red flowed into violet, violet into white, white into absence. It wasn't just snow. It was time itself falling in reverse, rising back toward an unmade past. "It's begun," she whispered. The fracture from the archive, the world's timeline collapsing in on itself. Sigrun tilted his head. "So soon? I expected at least one intermission." Vetra ignored him. "When we tore our ending, the universe lost its conclusion. Without an end, time folds inward to seek containment. We are living through a memory eating itself." The snow kept rising, a slow exhalation of unreality. Far off, the horizon bent, curling upward like a sheet of paper catching flame, except the fire was freezing. Arin watched in disbelief as patches of frost began to bloom on nearby campfires. The flames crackled backward, their embers retreating into logs that no longer burned. "Frost and fire," Sigrun muttered. "Poetry devouring its own metaphor. The audience will hate this. They prefer simpler miracles." But there was no audience left, not one that could comprehend what was happening. The ground beneath them began to hum, low and steady, like the pulse of a dying heart. Vetra closed her eyes and listened. "We have little time. When the timeline collapses completely, everything will compress into a single moment, one eternal instant where all beginnings and endings coexist. After that, there will be no before or after, only was." Arin looked around helplessly. "What do we do?" She shook her head. "We hold the present. We anchor ourselves here, or will dissolve into our own possibilities." Sigrun chuckled softly, though there was no mirth in it. "Ah! But the present is the slipperiest lie of all. Even storytellers can't hold it for long." Vetra's gaze hardened. "Then you'll help us keep it." He bowed mockingly. "And how would you have me do that, goddess? Narrate reality into obedience." "Yes," she said. "If anyone can speak the moment still, it's you." For once, Sigrun said nothing. The collapse. By nightfall, the world had become an hourglass shattering in slow motion. The rivers flowed in both directions, sometimes forward, sometimes back. Stars flickered between birth and extinction. The moon fractured into phases all at once. Crescent, full, gone, reborn, its light trembling like an unstable heartbeat. Everywhere, echoes of futures and pasts overlapped. Arin saw himself 1,000 times. As a child, as a warrior, as a man who had never left home, as a corpse buried under frost. Each one shimmered faintly, like reflections in breaking glass. "Don't look at them," Vetra warned. "The self is contagious when the timeline weakens." He tried not to, but they moved with his rhythm, each version mimicking him half a heartbeat too late. The air smelled of iron and memory. They reached a plateau overlooking what had once been a valley. Now it was a whirlpool of light. Every event that had ever taken place there collapsing into itself. He could see ancient wars overlapping with future cities, fires that hadn't yet been lit, reflected in ruins long buried. Vetra stared down, awe and horror mingling in her eyes. This is what a world without sequence looks like, meaning unraveling into simultaneity. Sigrun touched the hilt of his blade, not out of fear but reverence. "Even chaos composes its own meter," he murmured, every end returning to its prologue. Arin turned to him. "Can you stop it?" Sigrun's smile was sad. "Stop it? No. But perhaps I can stall it." Vetra's gaze sharpened. "What are you thinking?" "The same thing I always am," he said. "Narration." 3. The storyteller's bargain. They camped at the edge of the anomaly, though camp was a word losing meaning. Their fire froze upward, the smoke flowing into snow like ink returning to its pen. Arin couldn't sleep. Dreams had become infected by proximity. Each time he closed his eyes, he woke into a different version of himself. In one, he had never met Vetra. In another, he had become the child from the bridge, holding the hand of a woman with silver hair. He stopped trying. Sigrun sat apart from them, cross-legged in the frost, murmuring to himself. His audience whispered back, hundreds of invisible voices, now nervous, confused, some even weeping. Arn approached carefully. "You're talking to them again." "They're restless," Sigrun said softly. "They feel the script collapsing. They were born for my telling. You see, echoes that became listeners. Without time, they don't know how to exist." "Then stop narrating," Arn said. "Let them go." Sigrun looked up. "You don't understand. If I stop narrating, we go. The story dissolves when the storyteller falls silent." Arn hesitated. "Then what happens if you keep talking?" A faint smile crossed the storyteller's lips. "Maybe nothing. Maybe everything." Vetra joined them, her presence casting faint light. "Sigrun," she said, "you can anchor us, can't you?" He nodded slowly. "For a time. Words create sequence. Sequence resists collapse. But the cost." "Tell me." "My voice," he said simply. "It would burn itself into the present to keep us here. I would become the story, but never tell it again." Arn's throat tightened. "You'd lose yourself." Sigrun looked at him, eyes calm. A storyteller is never himself for long. Every tale leaves less of him behind. Vetra stepped closer. "We can find another way." He laughed softly. "You're still divine enough to believe in alternatives. I envy that." Then he stood, drawing from his coat a shard of broken glass, the remnant of some ancient mirror, its surface etched with faint runes. "When this began," he said, "I was cursed to remember every version of every story. Maybe this is how I end that curse, by becoming one true moment." He looked up at them, and for the first time, his expression carried no irony, no performance, only peace. "Hold to me when the silence comes," he said. "And whatever you do, don't look away." "For," the voices flamed, he began to speak. At first it was quiet, a murmur barely distinguishable from the wind. But soon his words took on weight, resonance, direction. Each syllable shimmered in the air, glowing faintly blue, weaving itself into threads of sound that wrapped around him like silk. Arn felt pressure in his chest, as though the world were realigning itself to Sigrun's rhythm. Vetra closed her eyes, listening. "He's binding us in narrative sequence," she whispered. "Every word he speaks is a heartbeat of time." Sigrun's voice rose, melodic and commanding. He spoke not in any known language, but in the grammar of existence. Cadence instead of syntax, rhythm instead of meaning. The air thickened. The falling snow froze mid-flight, suspended between ascent and descent. For a moment, everything held still. The frost paused within the fire. The collapsing stars above stopped flickering, as if they too were listening. Sigrun's cloak flared outward, alive with his invisible audience. They were screaming now, not in fear, but in awe, thousands of voices overlapping in harmony. Their words became notes. Their notes became light. Arn watched, transfixed. He's doing it. But Vetra's face was stricken. He's burning through himself too fast. Sigrun's voice began to tremble, though not from weakness. Each word left his mouth as a visible mark, golden radiant, searing the air. They spiraled around him, forming runes that hovered like halos. One by one, the runes flared, releasing sparks that solidified into moments, small fragment of time that held firm amid the chaos. Arn saw one hover near him, a second of his own laughter with Vetra by a river that never existed. Another showed a vision of the archive collapsing, frozen yet contained. Sigrun's words carved anchors in the storm of reality. Each phrase bought them another heartbeat of existence. Then came the fracture. The sky split. Colors bled in reverse. Crimson to gold, gold to white, white to absence. The snow now rose faster, pulled toward an unseen center high above. Gravity inverted completely. The ground shuddered beneath them. Sigrun's voice cracked, blood trailing from his lips like molten ink. Still he spoke. "Time is a wheel." The words ignited, burning themselves into the air. The present as it spoke. A tremor shook the plateau. "We are the weight that keeps it turning." The last sentence exploded into radiance. Vetra cried out. The light was blinding. Every sound dissolved, except for Sigrun's final whisper, softer than silence, stronger than prayer. Now, the rune formed in the air, a simple shape, 3 lines intersecting, glowing with impossible color. Then the light imploded, dragging all sound, all chaos, all existence into itself. The world stopped. The still moment. When Arin opened his eyes, there was no sky, no horizon, no sound, only the colorless expanse of stillness. Not white, not gray, but the absence of all contrast. He looked down. Beneath him, frost and fire coexisted, frozen mid-embrace. The world was paused at the edge of dissolution, anchored by a single point of meaning, the rune. It floated before them, bright and alive. Now, the letters weren't letters, but the idea of immediacy made visible. Each line pulsed like a heartbeat, keeping the world from falling inward. Vetra knelt before it, her face streaked with tears that did not fall. "He did it," she whispered. "He anchored us in the present." Arin looked around desperately. "Where is he?" There was no answer, only echoes that didn't echo. "Sigrun," he called. The sound of his name traveled a short distance and then folded back, trapped in the air like a moth behind glass. Vetra closed her eyes. "He's gone." His voice became the anchor. Every syllable he ever spoke condensed into this, the rune of the present. Arin stepped forward, touching the edge of the glowing sigil. It pulsed gently beneath his fingers, warm, alive. "Can we bring him back?" Vetra shook her head. No voice survives its own silence. For a long while, neither spoke. The stillness around them felt sacred, unbearable. Then Vetra said softly, "Listen." He did, and realized there was sound after all. Not words, not music, but the faint hum of continuity. The world was breathing again. He smiled through tears. "He bought us time." "More than that," she said. "He taught the world how to be present." 6. The echo of what was lost. Days, or what passed for days, resumed slowly. The snow no longer rose or fell. It simply hung in the air, forming soft bridges of crystal between what had been moments. The frost and the fire melted, flames returning to their rightful warmth. The sky regained motion, though not direction. Vetra studied the rune constantly, her fingers tracing its edges without touching. "It's alive," she said once. "It feeds on awareness. As long as someone remembers this moment, truly feels it, time continues forward." Arin nodded. "Then we won't forget." They built a cairn nearby, stacking stones from a fractured plateau. At its center, they inscribed Sigrun's name, though the letters refused to stay still, rearranging themselves into hundreds of variations. Singer, witness, voice between worlds. Each iteration shimmered briefly before fading. Vetra smiled sadly. Even gone, he refused his consistency. Arin touched the stone. Maybe that's his immortality, never being one thing long enough to end. At night, they sat beside the rune and watched the horizon flicker back into existence. Stars reassembled themselves, cautiously, like children learning to walk. Constellations returned in strange new shapes, some familiar, others unrecognizable. Vetra looked upward. He rewrote the heavens. Arin followed her gaze. "No," he said softly. He freed them. For the first time in eons, the stars were unscripted. They moved not in patterns, but in improvisation, jazz across eternity. 7, the price of the present. But every miracle demands its echo. Days later, they noticed cracks. Not in the ground, in memory. When Arin tried to recall their first meeting, his mind stumbled. The details blurred. Sometimes he remembered her in the ruins of the library. Other times by the river. Sometimes beneath the bridge of silence. The order had unraveled. Vetra noticed it too. "We're losing sequence again," she said. "Without Sigrun, the world forgets how to narrate itself." He looked at the rune. "Then we'll speak for it." So they did. Each morning, they told the story aloud, of snow falling upward, of frost and fire, of a man who turned his voice into a bridge between seconds. Each retelling steadied the air a little more, but they could feel the silence pressing closer. The rune dimmed whenever they stopped. One night, while Vetra slept, Arin sat alone beside it. He stared at the glowing lines and whispered, "He anchored us in the present. But how long can the present last?" The rune pulsed softly, as if answering. "As long as you do." He smiled faintly. "Then I'll stay awake." He didn't. He fell asleep sitting against the rune, and in his dream, he stood once more on the bridge of silence. The snow there fell properly, downward. Sigrun was waiting. "You kept walking," the storyteller said, smiling. Arn tried to speak, but no sound came. Sigrun placed a finger to his lips. "No need for words. You're living the part one never could. The story that doesn't need to be told to be real." He turned, his cloak dissolving into ink. "Keep the moment alive. Arn, that's all stories ever wanted." Then he vanished, leaving only the faint echo of laughter, bright, brief, and kind. 8. The new dawn. When Arn awoke, the rune had changed. The word now had begun to sprout smaller runes around its edges, branches of possibility growing outward like veins of light. Each shimmered faintly, forming fragments of phrases. "Still here. Keep breathing. Begin again." Vetra stood nearby, watching in wonder. "It's evolving." He nodded. "So is the world." They looked eastward. The horizon was no longer folding. It was expanding. Light returned not from the sun, but from within the air itself, glowing to the fabric of space like blood through translucent skin. The snow resumed its descent, downward this time. Frost melted from the rivers, releasing the water's memory. The timeline began to stretch forward again, tentative, uncertain, alive. Arn felt warmth on his face. "He did it," he said. "We're moving again." Vetra smiled softly. "Not we. Everyone. Everything." He turned to her. "Then what happens now?" She laughed quietly. "Exactly that." He looked back at the rune. The word shimmered once, and for the briefest instant he thought he heard Sigrun's voice again, faint but joyful. "Tell it well." And then it was gone. 9. The epilogue that refused to end. Later, when the snow had settled and the frost no longer whispered, Vetra wrote a single phrase in the earth beneath the rune. The world began again, because one voice chose to stop. Arn added below it, and because two others chose to remember. The rune pulsed brighter, sealing the words into the soil. Vetra turned to him. He would have liked that. "He'll hear it," Arn said, "wherever story still breathes." She smiled. "Then let's keep breathing." And so they did. The sky above unfolded once more into rhythm, stars tracing new constellations, one shaped like a quill, another like an open mouth, another like 3 intersecting lines. The world reborn continued its fragile, luminous spin, and at its center, hidden beneath snow and fire alike, the rune shone endlessly, the word that was not past or future, but the sacred, impossible, eternal heartbeat of all existence. Now,